So it's 100 years of Malcolm X that we're celebrating today. And so this is actually a historic date all across the globe, and certainly especially in the US, in the United States. And we are we're going to have another clip because we feel it's important to give you a feel for Malcolm himself. So for me, he's one of the most charismatic Pan-African black liberation leaders that there have been. So, you know, if anybody, I hope is not bored by these speeches, but this is a shorter clip, and then we'll kick right into the program as detailed to everybody. So if we can get this up and running. Okay, Stephen?
Tonight, Front Page Challenge welcomes the outspoken Negro leader, Malcolm X.
Sir, what's the real reason why you two men split? Is it merely ideological, or is it personality? What else?
Probably personality. It was not the statement that originally was given by the movement when we split. It's more personality than anything else.
You've called people like Martin Luther King, who just got a Nobel Peace Prize, an Uncle Tom. Is this correct, first?
Well, I'd rather say that in the States, there's a law that has recently been passed, or a decision handed down by the court, wherein if you call someone an Uncle Tom, they can sue you for libel.
Well,
so I never refer to them as Uncle Tom. I would say that Uncle Martin is my friend.
Uncle Martin is your friend, yet you would disagree with his approach to what he wants to accomplish.
Definitely. If his approach would bring about what the black man in America needs to completely eliminate the problem that we have, I would say well and good. But I very much doubt that anyone who adopts the approach that Martin Luther King has been teaching to our people in that country can point to any meaningful gains that has actually served to solve the problem.
Black Muslims have sometimes, whether you have or not, and I think probably you have sometimes, it seemed to me, been preaching hate to meet hate.
I don't advocate any kind of hate.
But there's a lot of talk that sounds very much like it.
No, I think that the guilt complex of the American white man is so profound until when you begin to analyze the real condition of the black man in America, instead of the American white man eliminating the causes that create that condition, he tries to cover it up by accusing his accusers of teaching hate. But actually, they're just exposing him for being responsible for what exists.
Well, that's something of an argument, but I've heard speeches made by some of the people of your group. I think I've heard you make speeches. It seemed to me that you were advocating what I would have to describe, I think, as violence to meet the serious injuries that have been done your people, with which I totally agree.
I don't call that violence. I don't in any way encourage black people to go out and initiate acts of aggression indiscriminately against whites. But I do believe that the black man in the United States, and any human being, anywhere, is well within his right to do whatever is necessary, by any means necessary, to protect his life and property, especially in a country where the federal government itself has proven that it is either unable or unwilling to protect the lives and property of those human beings.
Just before Pierre takes it, you've got a pretty good fighter in the world's heavyweight champion lined up with you to help out. Yes, Pierre.
Well, Mr. X, I guess I call you that. Is that the proper appellation,
yes.
Mr. X? I'm wondering if you still believe, as I think you certainly did at the time you were allied to the black Muslim movement, in a segregated black nation in North America.
I don't believe in any form of segregation or any form of racism. I'm against any form of segregation and against racism.
Am I right in saying that the black Muslim movement, which you have left, did believe in that?
Well, Elijah Muhammad taught his followers that the only solution was a separate state for black people. And as long as I thought he genuinely believed that himself, I believed in him and believed in his solution. But when I began to doubt that he himself believed that that was feasible, and I saw no kind of action designed to bring it into existence or bring it about, then I turned in a different direction.
Are you still a Muslim yourself?
Oh, yes. I'm a Muslim. I believe in the religion of Islam, which believes in brotherhood, complete brotherhood of all people. But at the same time that I believe in this brotherhood, I don't believe in forcing my desire for brotherhood upon those who aren't willing to accept it.
Of course, I think the Christians would say that they also believed in brotherhood. What did you say to that?
I'd say they believe in it, but don't practice it.
That'd be a pretty good answer.
Sir, when the muezzin goes up in the minaret twice a day, he cries to the world, there is but one God, and he is Allah. Do you deny that there is a Christian God?
The muezzin does this 5 times a day.
5 times, and I only heard him twice.
Well, you were fortunate to hear him twice. But he does this 5 times a day, and the same God that he says that he expresses the existence of is the God that the Christians profess to believe in themselves, and the God that the Jews believe in. One God, the creator of the universe. The Muslims believe in the God that created the universe, and I think the Christians do, and the Jews do. Now, as long as all of them are talking about the creator, the Jews may call him Jehovah, and Christians may have another name for him. Those who are Arabic-speaking refer to him as Allah. Well, we believe in the same God.
Now, as the Muslim religion advances in the United States, are you modernizing it or sticking with the old faiths? For example, the complete segregation of the sexes.
I think that everything today on this earth is being modernized. Religious principles and practices, as well as political and other things.
Now, when you went to Mecca, this is a very sacred and forbidden city. I tried to get to Mecca myself and certainly didn't make it, not being a Muslim. But how would they accept you as one? You're an American. There are few American Muslims.
This is true, and by being an American and not having not being able to speak the Arabic language, I did strike a snag, a very serious snag, but I was fortunate to have been pretty well known by the officials in Arabia, and they knew too that I had accepted Orthodox Islam. It had been highly publicized in the paper, and I became a guest of the state. I was a guest of Prince Faisal, the present King Faisal, and they made it possible for me to go before the committee, Hajj committee or Hajj court, who examines you and asks you questions about your belief, and if you pass it, then you are okay to go to Mecca. But it's
You would
true.
have to have a translator then.
I had one. Then realizing that our problem in America, that we are black Americans, and we have a problem that goes beyond religion, we formed a group known as the Organization of Afro-American Unity. And the objective of this organization, it's non-religious, number one. Any Negro can belong to it. And the objective of that organization is to bring about a condition that will guarantee respect and recognition of the 22 million black Americans as human beings. We feel that the problem, number one, of the black man in America is beyond America's ability to solve. It's a human problem, not an American problem or a Negro problem. And as a human problem or a world problem, we feel that it should be taken out of the jurisdiction of the United States government and the United States courts and taken into the United Nations in the same manner that the problems of the black man in South Africa, Angola, and other parts of the world, and even the way they're trying to bring the problems of the Jews in Russia into the United Nations because of violation of human rights. We believe that our problem is one not of violation of civil rights, but a violation of human rights. Not only are we denied the right to be a citizen in the United States, we're denied the right to be a human being.
Mr. X, may I thank you very much for coming on our program and perhaps clearing away some of the cobwebs of misconception that some of us might have had about your belief. And I think you're a very sincere man, and it takes a lot of courage to admit a former belief is wrong, and we congratulate you for that and the service you performed tonight in giving us your views. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other.
Yes, thank you for the suggestion, Kobi, but I just want to go for a few formalities before we get to that, but we give thanks. So there's lots to share in terms of Malcolm X, and you know that's an important video clip right there. But essentially what I would say is that he's speaking in terms of identity and the impact of white supremacy upon black people, fundamentally. But before we kind of get into the talking part of the program, I just want to allow the Deputy Principal's office to bring greetings, and Dean Ricketts is here, and then we'll kick off with the program. So let me formally introduce myself. My name is Dr. Michael Barnett. I am a senior lecturer in the Department of Sociology, Psychology, and Social Work. And I, along with Stephen, put our heads together to conceptualize this event because we, both of us, in our own ways, admire Malcolm X and his contribution to black liberation and black empowerment, along with many other black leaders, such as our own Marcus Garvey. So this was something that is, if you like, a work of passion in and of itself. And I'm glad that those of you who've come here have taken the time out, and hopefully you will enjoy the program in its entirety. Without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Marvin Reed from the Deputy Principal's Office to bring greetings. Please. Yes. And then after him, we'll hear from Dean Ricketts, who has an interesting Caribbean connection, I think, with Malcolm X.
All right, so I'll try not to stay too long since we're all here for the entree. All right, so colleagues, friends, May 19th is actually quite an important historical day. Not only does it represent the Earth Day, as I'm told, for Malcolm X. In my profession, I just happen to be a physician sometimes. In my profession, today, May 19th, is actually World Family Doctors Day. And so it's one of those days that we spend a lot of time trying to remind ourselves, as well as the rest of the world, of the relative importance of your family physician and how they interact and work within the health system. But today I'm not here to talk about medicine. I'm rather wearing a relatively strange hat. I'm here interacting with my humanities colleagues. And I really liked the last clip that you played of Malcolm X. The issue is, it's not a civil rights issue. It's really how do we interact with each other at the basic level of recognizing and accepting that we're all humans. As a physician, I remember one of the first things that we did, and we any of you who were to donate blood, it's really the same red, eh? So we have the same colors. So I'll go formally into my greetings, and I just want to say good evening to everyone. And those of us who are online who have joined us this evening in recognition of the worthwhile contribution that Malcolm has made to this humanity. It's a privilege for those of us here at the University of the West Indies to host this commemorative lecture marking 100 years since the birth of Malcolm Little, internationally known as Malcolm X. I'm told he was born to Grenadian mother, Louise Langon, and then you'll be able to probably tell me some more, and influenced by the philosophies of Jamaica's first national hero, the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Malcolm X's outlook and activisms were shaped in significant ways by his Caribbean heritage, his Garveyite principles, and as you heard, his religion, his spirituality. It is especially appropriate, therefore, that we gather here in Jamaica, the birthplace of Garvey, to reflect on the life and legacy of one of the most notable ideological successors. Malcolm X's visit to Jamaica in 1965, shortly before his passing, offered a meaningful exchange of ideas between a prominent international figure and a newly independent nation navigating its post-colonial reality. His engagement with students and academics here at the Mona campus helped to foster a lasting intellectual and cultural impact, one that continues to resonate today, as we see it manifested in our erstwhile colleague here, Dr. Barnett. This evening's lecture is an opportunity to explore the relevance of Malcolm X's contribution to the global conversations around identity, justice, human rights, and empowerment. His legacy invites ongoing dialogue about the shared experience and aspirations of African-descended communities worldwide. We are honored to welcome Reverend Kobi. Welcome, sir. a member of the Little family who has traveled to Jamaica to offer his reflections on Malcolm X's enduring influence. We also express our gratitude to Dr. Michael Barnett and Mr. Stephen Golan for their continued work in promoting historical awareness through scholarship and public engagement. We'd also like to thank our sponsors, Victoria Mutual, for their contribution to make this evening possible. As we mark the centenary, may it inspire thoughtful reflection and renewed commitment to the principles that guided Malcolm X's life and work. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Professor Marvin Reed. And now we'll have greetings from Dean Ricketts, the Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good. Professor Marvin Reed, representing Principal Denzel Williams, Dr. Michael Barnett, Senior Lecturer and Coordinator of this commemorative lecture, Dr. Stephen Golding, President of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, Jamaica, Reverend Kobi Little, keynote speaker, colleague members of the UE community, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good evening. On behalf of the Faculty of Social Sciences, co-host of this commemorative Malcolm X lecture, I extend a very warm greeting to all of you and to thank you for your attendance. I must at this point thank the Victoria Mutual Group for its sponsorship of this evening's lecture. As all of you would know already, today, May 19, marks the 100th birthday of Malcolm X, renowned civil rights activist and Pan-African champion. Malcolm X was not yet 40 when he was brutally murdered for his activism in the civil rights movement in the United States. He left a lasting legacy, the celebration of which I am honored to participate in this evening, not only as Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences, but also as a Grenadian, his mother being Grenadian. And as I was saying to Dr. Reverend Little, when I greeted him as I walked in, Malcolm's uncle, who is Reginald Langdon, lived 3 houses away from my house in a small community of Creighton in St. Paul's. So while his mom and family lived in Ladigue, they then dispersed to other communities across Grenada. And so, as part of the preparation for today, I began to ask my brother, my older brother and younger brother, and the good friend, my best friend from Grenada, who lives in New York, who actually lived next door, and she keeps in touch with some of, Elma, for example, she keeps in touch with, who is a granddaughter of Mr. Langdon, and my brother keeps in touch with Mario Lendor, who lives in New York, who is a grandson of Mr. Langdon, and who would be, therefore, a cousin of Malcolm X. Memory is important, and celebrating and marking important events is critical to us not forgetting. Universities have a very special duty in this regard, in helping us to not forget, but to always remember. Memory shapes identity as it connects us to the past and hopefully guides our future. Hopefully, I say. Remembering Malcolm X is an important act of connecting to this past, the atrocities of racial segregation and discrimination of African Americans in the United States, and all that went along with that. He was part of the number of influential and revolutionary figures in the civil rights movement who had Caribbean roots and whose fight for social justice changed the course of history. Others, of course, were people like James Weldon Johnson. I don't know how many of you know these names. W.E.B. Du Bois, who we teach as part of modern social theory, I think, Michael, in the Department of Sociology, Psychology, and Social Work. Stokely Carmichael, otherwise known more recently or later as Kwame Ture, and of course Marcus Garvey. The historical accounts tell us how influential Garvey's philosophy and opinions were to Malcolm X's family, starting with an uncle in Canada to whom his mother went when she migrated from Grenada, and later his mother and his father's own involvement in the UNIA, working directly with Marcus Garvey. So on this 100th birthday of Malcolm X, I think one of the birthday gifts we can give Malcolm is to ensure that the blood, sweat, and tears shed, and the many lives lost during the fight against segregation and discrimination were not shed or lost in vain. Recent events in various parts of the world today give us pause. And I want to end by quoting Ali Gill, who is president of the Grenada National Reparations Committee, who locates a lot of this celebration of Malcolm X's birthday in a reparatory frame as saying, quote, "We must continue tilling the soil of justice, watering the seeds of repair, and pruning the branches of hope, all while believing in our hearts that reparatory justice will one day be a reality." Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and we all look forward to the keynote address by Reverend Little, and of course some introductory remarks by Dr. Stephen Golding. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ricketts. I just want to, out of respect for the sponsors, the major sponsors for this event is actually Victoria Mutual, as Heather mentioned briefly. So if you would just give me a second, and I'm going to try and pull up, they sent me a video clip, so I'm just going to pull that up, and we'll hear from them. You know, it's commercial, but we're living in a commercial world, so I'll try and just...
While you're eye-saving for your next adventure, we're building you a better app. While your unit trust grows into a down payment, we'll help you find the house. Plus, our credit cards are earning you rewards with every tap. Giving and receiving support is as easy as VM money transfer. Trading FX at VM connects you and your business to the global village. And when it's time to invest for specific goals or your post-work years, relax and let your money and VM do the work. Transformation starts here. Visit transform.myvmgroup.com. Let's redefine the impossible. When you start eye-saving, more things become possible. That car you've been eyeing goes from your dreams to your driveway. That big vacation moves from your wish list to a spot on the calendar. The new fridge that was once a need becomes a star of your kitchen. Supercharge your money with a high-yield eye-saver card. Put your savings on autopilot so you won't even need to think about it. Turn that dream into a done with iSave from VMBS. Transformation starts here. Visit transform.myvmgroup.com. Let's go. FX at VM is more than foreign exchange. It opens doors, connecting you to the world. Whether buying cash to travel or selling it to spend here, you get more in the exchange. It gives businesses currency they can rely on to trade, grow, and to trade some more. FYI, our low fees and negotiable rates look good on any bottom line. And along with our branches and Money Express stores, our online solutions let you trade FX at VM even when you're not at VM. Transformation starts here. Visit transform.myvmgroup.com. Let's go. VM Money Transfer is more than remittances. It's Money Express stores where you're the VIP, an extensive network that spans the globe. So wherever you are, you'll find a sender. And when you're at home, you can always pick up your funds right down the road. It's lower fees and great rates that put more cash in your hands and direct-to-bank options so you can skip the line and just wait for your phone to ping. It's fast, safe, and easy, so you get the money you need for whatever you need when you need it. Transformation starts here. Visit transform.myvmgroup.com. Let's go.
Go. Okay, so fulfilling the commercial obligations, I will make some brief introductory remarks about Malcolm X, who, as I had, basically mentioned before, is one of the Pan-African freedom fighters that have actually made an impact on me anyway, personally, and on my journey into looking at liberation, the black liberation struggle, and the fight for black freedom, black autonomy, black sovereignty. So Malcolm X, for me, importantly, is a bridge between Marcus Garvey, our first national hero, and the Black Power movement of the 1960s. And I say this because inherent in Malcolm X's ideology and in his ontological perspectives, we see the notion of black empowerment, black liberation, black autonomy, I should say, is very important. And black nationalism is an element that he inherited not only from the Nation of Islam, but from Marcus Garvey's teachings. And in fact, very importantly, if we look at his autobiography, he talks quite vivaciously about the impact that Marcus Garvey had on him. So one of the things that he said that really got my attention in terms of his reference to Marcus Garvey, which I said is in his autobiography, which was co-written by Alex Haley, was, this is a quote from him, and this is in chapter 1 of his autobiography entitled Nightmare. And he says, "My father, the Reverend Little, was a Baptist minister, a dedicated organizer for Marcus Garvey's UNIA. With the help of such disciples as my father, Garvey from his headquarters in New York City's Harlem was raising the banner of black race purity and exhorting the Negro masses to return to their ancestral African homeland, a cause which had made Garvey the most controversial black man on earth. My father believed, as did Marcus Garvey, that freedom, independence, and self-respect could never be achieved by the Negro in America, and that could never be achieved by the Negro in America, and that therefore the Negro should leave America to the white man and return to his African land of origin. Among the reasons my father had decided to risk and dedicate his life to help disseminate this philosophy among his people was that he had seen 4 of his 6 brothers die by violence, 3 of them killed by white men, including 1 by lynching. What my father could not know was that one of the remaining 3, including himself, only 1, which was my Uncle Jim, would die by natural causes. Unfortunately, his father was also the victim of racial violence when they were in Lansing, Michigan." Malcolm then goes on to describe a typical UNI meeting in which his father would take him. So his father would journey around Michigan, and he would travel with Malcolm, which was interesting because Malcolm was the youngest of his children, and Malcolm would have been only about 6 at the time. But Malcolm seems to have a great, recall of what was going on. So he would describe a typical UNI meeting in which his father would take him. He says, "One of the reasons I've always felt that my father favored me was that to the best of my remembrance, it was only me that he sometimes took with him to the Garvey UNIA meetings, which he held quietly in different people's homes. There was never more than a few people at any one time, 20 at most, but that was a lot, packed into someone's living room. I noticed how differently they all acted, although sometimes they were the same people who jumped and shouted in the church. But in these meetings, both they and my father were more intense, more intelligent, and down to earth." Malcolm said, "It made me feel the same way." He reminisces fondly about what his father would say at these well-organized UNI meetings. He said, "My father would talk about how it would not be much longer before Africa was completely run by Negroes, by black men," was the phrase he always used. "No one knows when the hour of Africa's redemption cometh. It is in the wind, it is coming. One day like a storm, it will be here." And these are the sentiments of Marcus Garvey himself. So, as a result, we could argue that Malcolm's ideological orientation was clearly political. It was about social change It was about ideological upliftment of black people. And importantly, Malcolm joins the Nation of Islam in 1952, and he inherits many of the teachings of Elijah Muhammad as a result of being in the Nation of Islam. A Nation of Islam was both religious and secular. But I would argue that Malcolm X's emphasis on some of the secular elements of the Nation Islam, such as, developing businesses, what some people would call as economic nationalism, cultural nationalism, political nationalism, and religious nationalism. These are all tenets, even military nationalism, tenets of Marcus Garvey, which the Nation of Islam actually inherits. So one of the things we can see that it was not a struggle for Malcolm to be part of the Nation of Islam when he was there, because actually the Nation of Islam inherit a lot more from Marcus Garvey than we may well know, at least in terms of the secular dimension of the Nation of Islam. But as we do know, Malcolm in the 50s, he works assiduously, and he helps to popularize the Nation of Islam, is one of the arguments I've made. He helped to popularize it. The nation grows when he comes in there, especially in the late 50s, get into the early 60s. We have a plethora of temples now. We also have Malcolm really as the national spokesperson for the Nation of Islam, garnering a lot of attention, public attention, to the Nation of Islam, you could say, because in the early 60s, they really come under the spotlight of America. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, this is debatable. But the nation definitely comes under the spotlight, national attention in the US from the early 60s. One of the things, though, we could argue was that there was a tension with Malcolm, arguably, and some of the perspectives that the nation were propagating. And that was in that the religious and the personal, the individually orientated teachings of the nation were very much emphasized. But Malcolm was very eager to interact with some of the social systems, the wider systems of racism that existed, the social structures that were out there. And an argument could be made that, some people in the nation thought maybe he was trying to go too far with some of his perspectives and his thoughts about what America needed to be done to change the social structure, the wider social structures. Now, I should just say that we have a lot of emphasis on the development of self and the remaking of the individual within the Nation of Islam, in that the individual, one of the things is the last name. So Malcolm X went from Malcolm Little to Malcolm X because of his membership in the Nation of Islam. So generally, in gaining membership, you get an X. And that symbolizes that many of us don't know what our real last name is. Because when our ancestors were forcibly removed and taken to the West, their names were actually erased, their last names. And then you take on the name of the slave master. So that whereas your last name is a way of signifying who the slave master was, or whether you go back a century or 2 centuries, who that slave master could have been, it is harder to track down your precise ancestry unless you can find out, through records and so forth who your ancestors were. But the last name is not a signifier of the ancestry of people whose ancestors were, of course, enslaved persons. So the X designates that that's an unknown. The last name is an unknown. And then as you move through the ranks and so forth in the nation, you take on a last name, which is not a European one. So that we find that, you know, Malcolm X obviously becomes, you know, Malik Shabazz, and, you know, this name is clearly not a European one. Having said that, I want to just go further to elucidate Malcolm's transformation when he leaves the Nation of Islam and he goes from a black nationalist perspective to a Pan-Africanist perspective. Because in actual fact, what happened was that a lot of his attention was directed to what was going on in the US. But interestingly enough, when he leaves the Nation of Islam, which is March the 8th, 1964, and I'm not going to say too much about that because we have somebody else speaking to that. When he leaves the Nation of Islam on the 8th of March, 1964, he goes to Africa as well as Mecca in Arabia, and he travels the globe. But very importantly, on his journey to Africa, he has an audience with Kwame Nkrumah. This is April 1964, by the way. Nigeria, Liberia, Senegal, Egypt, Morocco, and Algeria, as well as the city of Mecca. But what he realizes was that black nationalism as an ideology was separating him and the organizations in the US from millions of people in the black wide world. In Ghana, Malcolm, when he talked to Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, agreed that Pan-Africanism was the key to the problems of people, of all people of African heritage. So Malcolm realized that in perceiving the race question as a domestic problem in the US only was a limited one. And therefore he started looking at the plight of black people globally. So interestingly enough, as I said, for me, he moves from a black nationalist perspective to a Pan-Africanist perspective, looking beyond the 20 million black person population in the US at the time and the problems of the wider world, of black people in the wider globe. And he says, interestingly enough, you know, after he comes back from Mecca, that would have been July 1964, he recalls vividly the Pan-African dimension, and he says, just as the American Jew is in political, economic, and cultural harmony with world Jewry, I was convinced that it was time for all African Americans to join the world's Pan-Africanists. Physically, we Afro-Americans might remain in America, fighting for our constitutional rights, but that philosophically and culturally, we Afro-Americans hardly needed to return to Africa and to develop a working unity in the framework of Pan-Africanism. So, sorry, I should have said, we Afro-Americans badly needed to return to Africa and develop a working unity in the framework of Pan-Africanism. So we see a distinct ideological shift for Malcolm X as he shifts from an arguably myopic form of black nationalism to what we considered to an all-encompassing Pan-Africanist global perspective. And, you know, we could consider Pan-Africanism basically globalized black nationalism, sorry. So basically, in short, what I'm arguing was that Malcolm, through his transformation, ideological transformation, was always concerned about the plight of black people. He loved black people. He was unwavering black liberation fighter, freedom fighter. He was unwavering in the struggle for black empowerment, just as Marcus Garvey was. And in this way, he basically was able to energize and actually inspire black leaders in the late 60s in the Black Power movement, going right on into the 70s and arguably up to date. So in this respect, if nothing else, we have to see Malcolm in the prism of black perfection, but as a black champion, African champion of redemption and of freedom and liberation. So I'll leave it there. Right, thank you. Okay, so having said that, we are going to have a few words from Minister Clive Mohammed, who wanted to give a perspective on Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam, and then we'll have Stephen Golden Smith. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Barnett. To Dr. Barnett, to Brother Stephen Golden, to the Reverend Kobi Little, to the Faculty of the Social Sciences, and to everyone in the room, greetings. And in the Nation of Islam, we say, Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be unto you. Before my coming here today, I contacted my leader and teacher last evening, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and I told him what was happening today, the celebration of our brother Malcolm X, our brother El Hajj Malik El Shabazz. And the minister instructed me directly in words. They are coming because they admire Malcolm, but that does not mean that they do not admire us. So do not cause controversy. Those were his direct words to me as instructions. So I just want to say that Malcolm, as a member of the family, because this is one family, it's the black family. When Malcolm met the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he got those teachings when he was incarcerated. He was in prison, and a brother of his visited him in prison and introduced the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad to him, and he accepted those teachings. And when he left prison, he was not the same. He was not the same person leaving prison that went to prison. He came out a new person, but also a revolutionary, a black revolutionary. He came out having a knowledge of himself, and that removed the scales from his eyes, that he was able to see more clearly what was happening to black people and why all of that was happening to black people. In 1959, Brother Malcolm traveled to Africa. He visited the United Arab Republic. The United Arab Republic at that time was recently formed between Egypt and Syria. He visited Ghana. He visited Nigeria and Sudan. And these visits were in preparation for the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad visiting Africa. And when he left the nation in 1964, he also revisited Africa. Dr. Barnett mentioned the countries in Africa that he visited at that time. Now, in any family, you will have differences. Differences of opinion, differences of views. And in the nation of Islam, with Brother Malcolm, differences arose. And a separation occurred. However, because we separate, it doesn't mean that we are not still family. And at that time, in the US of A, in particular, you had what we know as the COINTELPRO, the FBI counterintelligence program that actually infiltrated every black organization that was in the US. And in infiltrating, they sent in persons that looked like us, talked like us, dressed like us, had them even go up in ranks. But their aim was to disturb the movement, disrupt the movement, and that happened also in the Nation of Islam. And as a result of that, the separation occurred. Now, for years, the Nation of Islam have struggled with this talk that we are responsible, or the nation is responsible for the death of Brother Malcolm. Now, two men known at the time of the killing of Brother Malcolm as Norman Trix Butler and Thomas 15X Johnson spent decades in prison for murder. The murder which took place, as many of us may know, in 1965, when three men opened fire on Brother Malcolm in the Audubon Ballroom in New York. A 22-month investigation conducted jointly by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and lawyers for the two men found that prosecutors and two of the nation's premier law enforcement agencies, the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the New York Police Department, had withheld key evidence that, had it been turned over, would likely have led to the men's acquittal. Talmadge Ayer, the confessed assassin of Malcolm X, was caught at the scene. He testified at trial that Mr. Aziz and Mr. Islam, these are the names after these brothers changed their names, the two that was sentenced along with him, were not involved in the killing. In the late 1970s, Ayer signed an affidavit naming 4 other men who he said were involved in the murder. But these men spent 20 plus years in prison for a crime that, after they spent all those years in prison, the government of America actually paid them $36 million for falsely imprisoning them. So, Brother Malcolm, and I'm going to end on this note because I'm not going to be long. We could not have a Malcolm X without the Nation of Islam. Malcolm X, first and foremost, was made by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad made Malcolm X who and what he was while being in the Nation of Islam. And then, of course, the differences that arose and the split took place and he left the Nation of Islam. But in Brother Malcolm's passing, when it was said to the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, those who were close to him said when he heard of Brother Malcolm's assassination, he groaned, because no father wants to lose a son. The government pointed fingers at the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and then after the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad departed, then those fingers started pointing at the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And this is the way that you kill two birds using one stone. The government actually attempted to imprison the daughter of Brother Malcolm. How many of us are aware of that? Sister Quibila, she was accused by a Jewish boy of plotting, paying him money to assassinate the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in 1995. Minister Farrakhan came out and made a public statement, and he said this will not happen again. She would have been given 90 years if convicted. The minister said, you did that already, and you were successful in doing that. You will not do that again. Leave Quibila alone. And the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and Sister Betty Shabazz were able to come together as a family, the family that we originally were, and the family that we are supposed to be, and we are not going to allow anyone to come in between and divide and split the family. So we are here today particularly to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Brother Malcolm X. And I am honored to be in the company of a member of the Malcolm family. First time for me touching the hand of a member of the Malcolm family. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan would not have been in the Nation of Islam were it not for Malcolm X. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said the first time he heard that man speak, he thought it was God talking. That's how eloquent Brother Malcolm was. And so Minister Farrakhan was attracted to the Nation of Islam by Brother Malcolm. But all of us know that in 1995, Minister Farrakhan was able to call 1 million men to Washington, D.C. And even though they don't play the numbers, the official records that were taken was 1,700,000 men went to the mall in Washington, D.C. as a result of the call of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And the Jamaican flag was there. And black men from all class, creed, and, well, all class and creed were there. No matter what your belief system was, no matter what you taught in terms of your religious perspective, black men showed up to celebrate unity among themselves as a family based on that call. So Malcolm X cannot be outplayed, will not die. But in order for him to live, we have to adopt the principles that he taught, the principles that he shared, because Malcolm, Minister Farrakhan said, should not be reduced to a slogan by any means necessary. His principles should be studied. And when we study those principles and live those principles, then Brother Malcolm will forever live on through the principles that we adopt from the brother. Long live Malcolm X. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be unto you.
Thank you, Minister Clive Mohammed, for that perspective. And yes, so the Nation of Islam was a significant part of Malcolm's life. life. So, but anyway, the Nation of Islam can give a perspective here in Jamaica. And we do actually, for those who not realize, have a branch of the Nation of Islam here in Jamaica, which is headed by Minister Clive Mohammed. You know, it gives me great pleasure right now to introduce our next speaker on the program, and I'm speaking none other than Brother Stephen Golding, who is a great exemplar of the Marcus Garvey tradition. So I'm not much here, but I know a lot of you know about Stephen and work he's done, a lot of delegates and persons. So, yes, Stephen, yes, your time now. Your time now. Give thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Barnett. Greetings, everyone. I'm not Steve Golding, as it says on the program. That is a very famous musician, more famous than me. Those of you who know your reggae history know he played with the band Word, Sound and Power, which backed Peter Tosh. Michael is right, I am Stephen Golding. Dr. Ricketts, thank you for putting the doctor on it. I don't quite reach there yet. But I do wear the hat of a professor of Garveyism, having chaired the Garvey Studies Department at the Heidel University College. In fact, we just put out our first book for Garveyism at the early childhood level. It's called Daddy Marcus Nursery Rhymes. It's a counteraction to the Mother Goose nursery rhymes that teachers are still teaching children some 400 or 500 years after they were written, and not by us or for us, but by the very people who enslaved our ancestors. So if you haven't heard about the Daddy Marcus nursery rhymes, we are Jamaicanizing and Africanizing those old European nursery rhymes. So that's my 1 minute of my self-promotion. You can clap. Have you all ever heard of the white doll, black doll test? You've heard of this? Some of you don't look like you heard. This was like from the, what was it, from the 40s? Where they take a black child, they show them a white doll and they show them a black doll, and they ask them all kind of questions, which is the good one, which is the bad one, which one looks like you. You've heard of this? It's one of the reasons why Marcus Garvey in the 1920s invested in the Berry and Berry Ross doll making company to give black children black dolls to play with, because he said if you give them white dolls to play with, you are perpetuating the cycle of white supremacy, and they will want to grow up to look white, to be white. Malcolm X later spoke about who taught you to hate yourself. From the top of your head to the soles of your feet. Who taught you to hate your skin color? We still have a bleaching problem in Jamaica, right? It goes that far back. I was speaking to Reverend little earlier, and I said, you know what we need to come up with? We need to come up with a front seat, back seat test for black people. Because I was making note to him that every time we go to a function, you notice how black people never put themselves in the front row? We come in automatically, we sit at the back, and the whole front row will be empty. And I've been observing you all today. There's no sign on these seats saying it's reserved, because usually when you have VIP people come into a function, they don't reserve the back seat for the VIP people, It normally is on the front seats, reserved. That's not there. One of the things I did in Garveyism is when I teach my students from primary come up, because they suffer from the same syndrome, like the black dot, white dot, I'm talking about the front seat, back seat syndrome. I tell them that they got to see themselves as very important people. And the very important people never sit at the back. Even if they come to the function late, somebody escorts them to their seat. So as Reverend Little said earlier, I really want to invite some of you to come and fill these seats. And I would like the academics to begin, because Mr. Principal and Mrs. Dean, please come and take your seats up in the front and set an example for these black people who must know themselves in the 21st century, that when we walk into a function that is for us and by us, the seats in the front is where we belong. I'll wait for you. All right, I'm not going to be long because so much has been said, and I'm really here to introduce Reverend Little. But just to follow up, or as we say, veggie back on some of the things that were said earlier, because we're not piggybacking. As Jamaicans, I think we underscore our own influence in the making of Malcolm X. And, you know, as Jamaicans, we claim everything good that happened, you know. Any big thing that happened in the world, there's a Jamaican connection there somewhere, right? We created hip-hop, you know. The clips I played earlier, we played 2 clips of Malcolm X. The first one was of Malcolm's speech at the Oxford University. Great speech. This is right after he comes back from Africa, as Dr. Barnett was saying. He doesn't go straight back to America. He goes to Oxford. And then he's assassinated 2 months after that. That speech was in December of 1964. Of course, Malcolm was assassinated on February 21st, 1965. But I don't know how many Jamaicans know that the reason he spoke at Oxford was because the president, he was invited by the president of the student union there at the time, who was a Jamaican Rhodes Scholar by the name of Anthony Abrahams, the man who actually started the News Talk radio station here on the UWI campus, who also started the Breakfast Club, who was a one-time member of parliament for East Portland, who was also one of the first Jamaican directors of tourism. He's the person who got me my own start in media, right? And that gentleman with the headphones on right there is a former producer of the very show that he created for me to host. At that first meeting, he had several pictures of Malcolm in his house, pictures I have never seen on the internet. And it was the first time meeting him that I learned of his connection to Malcolm X. So that's just one Jamaican connection. But it goes much deeper than that, because as Dr. Ricketts said, Malcolm's mother, Louise Langdon, was the first secretary of the Montreal division of the UNIA, which was the 5th division to be formed, right? The first was in Kingston, the second was in New York, the third was in Panama. I can't remember where the 4th was, but the 4th was in Newport, Virginia, Newport News, Virginia. And the 5th division of the UNIA was started in Montreal by Louise Langdon's uncle, who was the first president. Louise Langdon was living with the uncle at the time, had some skills as a secretary, and became the first secretary of the division. Now, when Marcus Garvey, because I know the Nation of Islam will talk a lot about Elijah Muhammad's and the Nation of Islam's influence on Malcolm and making him who he was, and if it wasn't for them, there would be no Malcolm. But they forget, if there was no Marcus, there would have been no Elijah Muhammad. I know Minister Farrakhan has denied this, but our elders in the UNIA still speak of the record of one Elijah Poole, who was a member of the Detroit division of the UNIA before forming the Nation of Islam. And what's interesting is you look at the dynamics of the Nation of Islam. Their strongest cities at the start included Detroit, Chicago, New York, and Boston. When Marcus Garvey traveled to the United States, he arrived in New York May 9, 1916. No, he arrived in March of 1916, but he gave his first public lecture in Harlem on May 9, 1916. The lecture didn't go so good, for whatever reason. He left the city after that, and the next place he gave a public lecture was in the city of Boston, at a church called St. Cypriani's in the neighborhood of Roxbury. This is the very neighborhood that Louis Farrakhan comes from. And this is the neighborhood that Louis Farrakhan first hears Malcolm X speak at. Malcolm X lived in Boston before becoming a Muslim with his sister, Ella Little Collins, who joined the Nation of Islam around the same time or shortly before he did, and who also left the nation before he did and became a Sunni Muslim. She's also the person who took charge of the Organization for Afro-American Unity after Malcolm's assassination. And it's important for me to mention these people because on the 100th anniversary of Malcolm's birth, we have to also recognize the strength of the women around him who helped to make him the man that he was. Ella Little had a very serious impact on Malcolm. In fact, after the murder of his father, when Malcolm's mother was institutionalized, and she was institutionalized for up to 30 years, it was Ella Little who took Malcolm in. Now, Malcolm was the fourth of 7 children, Dr. Barnett, not the youngest of the little children, but certainly the last one to consciously know the father before his murder, right? The last child of Louise Langdon was from a different man than Earl Little, but Earl Little also had, I believe, 4 children before he married Louise Langdon. One of them was Ella Little Collins, right? So how interesting is it? Marcus Garvey's second public lecture is in this very community that Malcolm springs up in later. And Malcolm goes from being head of the mosque in Boston, and is then transferred to Harlem. Of course, Harlem is the original Garvey grounds, the headquarters of the UNIA, the place in New York City from which Marcus Garvey was, launched himself to the world. Now, here's the story of Reverend Earl Little, because we've spoken about his mother, and I know Reverend Little will have a lot to say about that, having just been to Grenada. But Earl Little comes from the branch of the Little family that was living in Georgia. Georgia is also the state that became the headquarters for the infamous Ku Klux Klan. Reverend Little would have met Marcus Garvey and heard him speak for the first time on March 25th, 1917 at the Big Bethel AME Church, where Reverend Little coincidentally also spoke a few months ago on March 25th, 1917 at the 2nd annual Marcus Garvey Symposium there. He was so impressed with Garvey that was the point at which he picked up himself and began to follow Garvey, leaving the state of Georgia where he lived, and also leaving his family behind to take up Garvey's cause. Early in 1919, Marcus Garvey travels to Montreal for the launching of the Montreal division of the UNIA in Canada. Who is with him in his entourage? A man known as Reverend Earl Little. Now, in the UNIA, they tell you that the parents met at a convention. Not quite true. They met at the launch of this Canadian division. Earl Little saw Louise Langdon. They met. They both were so enthused and captivated by whatever Garvey said that night that a few months later they wed. And it is Earl Little who takes Louise Langdon from her uncle's house in Canada into the United States as his wife. They settle first in the state of Nebraska. And this is why Malcolm and his older siblings are born in Omaha. And today was a big day in Omaha. But remember I mentioned and Dr. Barnett mentioned. One, Little comes from the state of Georgia. This is Klan country. He's witnessed several of his own siblings murdered by the Klan. In the mid-20s, and I'm talking 1921, before Garvey leaves the United States, he forms two divisions in Florida, the Coconut Grove Division and the Key West Division. Immediately, the Ku Klux Klan responds to this formation of UNIA divisions in these cities by re-energizing or forming Ku Klux Klan chapters in Florida. These chapters were set up by the Ku Klux Klan chapters in Georgia. While Reverend Little is doing Garvey's work in Nebraska and in other states, heading up to Michigan, he, and not only he, because you had several UNIA presidents in Florida and Georgia who became the target of the Ku Klux Klan. And this is what prompts Marcus Garvey in 1922 to call a meeting with the Ku Klux Klan in Atlanta. Not because he, as his detractors said, he was a black Klansman, not because he was trying to embrace white supremacy, but because as the president general of an organization where several of his presidents were being targeted. We had one president in Coconut Grove and in Key West, Reverend Higgs in Coconut Grove, Reverend Glashen in, and you notice both reverends, so these are black clergy, who were kidnapped, who were harassed. Garvey had a paramilitary organization known as the Universal African Legions that at one point took to the streets in Key West and saying if they find their president hanging from some tree somewhere, then other people, white people, are going to be hanging from a tree somewhere. The presidents were returned, roughed up, but not murdered. Garvey had to arrange for one to be sent back to Bahamas. He brought one up to New York. It became such a situation that Garvey himself had to have a sit-down with the Ku Klux Klan to get them to back off of the UNIA. While this is going on, he's getting letters, though, from Reverend Little. And we have these on record of his own harassment at the hands of the Ku Klux Klan. Malcolm X is born in Omaha, but his family is under so much pressure by the Klan that the family is forced to leave Nebraska, and this is how they end up in Lansing, Michigan. Unfortunately, following that meeting with the Klan, Garvey is arrested for mail fraud charges. He's sent to prison in Atlanta, of all places. Reverend Little even writes a letter to President Coolidge asking for Garvey to be released, to be pardoned. That also we have on record. And he did that not just as a UNIA president, but leader of an industrial workers union. So I don't think enough attention and credit is given to Malcolm's father in shaping Malcolm's very life himself, right? Malcolm speaks about going to UNIA meetings with his father, but to be honest, when Marcus Garvey is arrested and deported, Malcolm is born in February, in May of 1925. This is 2 months after Marcus Garvey is in prison. He entered prison February 8, 1925. Malcolm is born May 19. He's deported to Jamaica in November of 1927. So the meetings that Malcolm observes and writes about in his autobiography really are meetings not at the height of where the UNIA was when his parents met, but really on the back-end decline after Garvey is deported, after the organization comes under harassment. And this is the reason why he speaks about meetings in people's houses, not in Liberty Halls, not the great parades that Marcus Garvey and the UNIA were used to putting on, because they were now under threat. Their leader had been targeted, their leader had been deported, and now they were beginning to meet in secret. And I think that had a lot to do with shaping Malcolm, but it also explains why his knowledge of Garvey growing up is not what it is when he goes to prison and begins to read about Garvey after his father's assassination. Of course, Malcolm was only 6 years old when his father died. And you can remember, I don't know how many memories you have before you're 4 or 5 that you think shape your worldview. But a lot of what Malcolm knows about Marcus is what he learns later from his own research, right? It's important to note, though, that towards the end of his career, and Dr. Barnett said this, he calls it his evolution from black nationalism to Pan-Africanism. I'm not sure if Garvey would agree with those terms, because Malcolm does remain a black nationalist. But he said it in that last clip that we played, if you didn't see the clips earlier. He speaks about looking at the problem facing black people not as a civil rights issue, but as a human rights issue. That's pure Garveyism. Marcus Garvey was the first person to send a delegation to the League of Nations to represent the African race at the formation of the League of Nations, because in 1919 at the peace conference in Paris, when the world decided to form a governing body, they didn't invite any black people. Yet we make up a huge and significant portion of the world population. Garvey was bold enough to send a delegate there, and guess what he chose? A man from Haiti. Think on it deeply. A man from Haiti named Eliezer Cadet to that League of Nations to represent the interests of black people. And they refused to seat the gentleman, saying that he did not represent a single nation. Of course, because of that, a year later, in his Declaration of Rights for the Negro people of the world, this is why Garvey declares the League of Nations null and void. And in 1920, he forms a plebiscite in New York himself. 25,000 delegates come to New York, and 25,000 delegates elect him to the position of the provisional president of Africa. Marcus Garvey is the only man to claim leadership of the entire race of African descendants. He was not leader of a nation of Islam. He was not leader of African Americans. He was not the leader of Africans in Jamaica. He was not even leaders of just Africans in the diaspora, but he was elected the provisional president of Africa, which claimed all African descendants around the world as citizens of Africa. So when you hear people talk about Marcus Garvey is self-appointed, it's a lie. Marcus Garvey put on airs, didn't put on anything. What he did was organize the race in a way that we had not known organization before. And it is the reason why one of his very famous quotes is, the greatest weapon that is used against the Negro is disorganization. Right? So allow me now to introduce Reverend Little. I know many people are going to ask, well, how are you related to Malcolm X? What we know is that their ancestors were owned by the same slave masters, and they bear the name of that plantation. He will tell you himself of his mother or his sister, and he's met the Shabazz family. I will allow him to do that. But what I can tell you is, as much as Malcolm X is the ideological heir and son of Marcus Garvey, Reverend Little himself considers himself the spiritual son of Malcolm X, which makes him the spiritual grandson of Marcus Garvey, because you know me, I have to go back there every time, right? And as I said, I was happy to welcome him to the second annual Marcus Garvey Symposium in Atlanta earlier this year, where we placed a plaque marking Garvey's speech on March 25th, 1917. March 25th is now also the International Day for Remembrance of the victims of the transatlantic slave trade. So it was a huge event, and I think so significant to today, because that would have been the first time that Malcolm X's father heard and saw and spoke to Marcus Garvey, right? I've known Reverend Little for over 30 years. We graduated from the same university. As you can tell by the beard, he's much older than me. No, he was a senior when I was a freshman in school, but he was also president of the Black Student Union. And the first year I entered that school, he had become famous for leading a sit-in in the library the year before in response to a display the university had put up for Black History Month. That display was a picture of a white abolitionist family. Can you imagine? For Black History Month, they decided to put up the picture of a white abolitionist family. As leader of the black student at the time, he refused to accept it. And so what developed was a sitting in the library, which later involved the Baltimore police. The students refused to leave the library until the display was taken down. I then, a few years after that, worked with him when he fought to have the student members of the NAACP votes recognized in the national and state elections. I went with him when he took out a lawsuit to have these votes recognized, and I happened to be in the front of the line when he passed the paper back to us and said, just sign this. I wasn't sure what I was signing, but I trusted him. Now if you look online and Google it, the case is called Golding et al. versus the NAACP, right? So, and he was also, and this is my final accreditation to you, sir, he was also the first young black person I heard get up in an auditorium at that university and raise the issue of reparations for black people for slavery. This is 30 years ago. Now let me tell you, you can talk about reparations now and everybody looks with a serious face and says, oh, okay, yes, yes, yes. But 30 years ago, the snickers that was coming from the room, and not just from the white people. Even me, myself, was looking at him like, Kobi, what? What are you, what? Reparations for slavery? I had never considered it before. But he was adamant, he was passionate, he spoke from the heart, he spoke as a young leader, and I've seen him mature into an even better leader. I'm happy to call him brother, I'm happy to call him friend, I'm happy to call him colleague, and I'm happy to introduce to you all now Reverend Kobi Little. Please give him a round of applause.
Good evening, my sisters and brothers. Part of me is inclined to whisper to draw you closer so you can hear me. But I'm just going to say it loud. Nothing I have to say really matters if we don't get the lesson from Malcolm about black people drawing together in unity. What Malcolm challenges us to do, the honesty that he challenges us to examine ourselves with, the honesty that he challenges us to examine the world around us. It demands that we take action. And if we can't fill a few seats in the front, then what action are we taking? So what I would like to do, what I would ask, in the spirit of building unity, is if you're on the left side or the right side, just come in and fill in these seats and let us be together with each other. Let us be together and love each other. Be connected to one another. May God bless all of his children. Thank you. I want to start by thanking each of you for coming this evening. I feel welcome, I feel received, and I'm gratified that you would take time out of your schedule to come see what this country preacher has to say about one of the most significant leaders of the last 100 years. I certainly want to thank Professor Marvin Reed and the Office of the Deputy Principal. I want to thank Dean Heather Ricketts for allowing us to have this program today and for extending the invitation to me and for your scholarship and contributing to this conversation about the Honorable Malcolm X. Also want to give thanks to Professor Michael Barnett for all of the work that he has done to pull this program together. We're grateful to you. And glad to meet Brother Clive Muhammad. And we thank you for your contributions to this program today and for the continuing work that you do in the community. I'm very grateful for the Honorable Stephen Golding, President of the UNIA here in Jamaica. I won't assume that I can tell you anything about a man who gives so much of his life to the people of Jamaica, but I will tell you that it has been an honor to know Stephen from the time that he was a teenager, even until today, where he is a leading man, not only in Jamaica and the Caribbean, but across the African world. I have had the honor and the privilege for the last couple of years to be seatmates with Professor Golding at the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent. And that is a UN body that meets to discuss the issues of the African world. And I can tell you that President Golding is a strong voice representing Jamaica, but also advocating on behalf of black people. And I look forward to working with him not only on the Garvey Symposium that we have been conducting around the African world, but also on the Justice Booth. So I'm not going to say anything else about that. At the appropriate time, President Golding will present the idea, and I hope that you all will join in. I'm just clicking away here and bringing up pictures, but that was not my intent. So let's go back to, let's see. That's a good picture. Malcolm Little, Detroit Red, Malcolm X, Brother Malcolm, Brother Minister, El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, Omawale. Today we celebrate 100 years of Malcolm X. In the grand scheme of things, in the grand scheme of the cosmos, 100 years is less than a blink of an eye. Yet in the modern world, 100 years is a significant period of time. My challenge this evening has been made easier by the previous speakers who have presented so much of the history. So my challenge this evening is to make plain the meaning of 100 years of this man, our black shining prince. To help us all feel like we too knew this man, had him smile at us, speak to us, love us, challenge us, lead us. And I have gently paraphrased the words of Ossie Davis, the actor and writer who offered Brother Malcolm's eulogy. And I'd like to share a few words from Ossie Davis with us to set the tone this evening. Somebody somewhere, not here, but someone out in the internet sphere, someone who didn't come tonight, is asking the question, why are they talking about Malcolm X? Why is he relevant? Wasn't he a hater? Did he really matter beyond African American? And Brother Ozzie says during the eulogy, there are those who would consider it their duty as the friends of Negro people to tell us to revile him, to flee even from the presence of his memory, to save ourselves by writing him out of the history of our turbulent times. Many will say, turn away from this man, for he is not a man but a demon, a monster, a subverter, and an enemy of the black man. And we will smile. They will say that he is of hate, a fanatic, a racist, who can only bring evil to the cause for which you struggle. And we will answer and say unto them, did you ever talk to Brother Malcolm? Did you ever touch him or have him smile at you? Did you ever really listen to him? Did he ever do a mean thing? Was he even himself associated with violence or any public disturbance? For if you did, you would know him. And if you knew him, you would know why we must honor him. Malcolm was our manhood, our living black manhood. This was his meaning to his people. And in honoring him, we honor the best in ourselves. So our work this evening, that's Ozzie Davis. So our work this evening is to remember those who set the stage for Malcolm's work. His mother and father, the Honorable Marcus Garvey, Ida B. Wells, William Henry Shepard, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman. We call the names of these ancestors because as long as we invoke the spirit of our ancestors, they're yet with us. In fact, let me pause. If you have ancestors or if you have heroes that you'd like to call their name now and to invite them to be in this space with us, the floor is open for that. Who are Jamaica's national heroes? Norman Manley is a hero of mine. Ashe. So our work this evening is to remember those who set the stage for Malcolm's work, 1. 2, to reflect on what Malcolm meant in his time. And 3, what he means today, 100 years after his birth. Time is such an interesting concept. We know white folks operate on linear time, and in the modern world, most of us try to operate on linear time too. But we also know that, and we're in the family meeting this evening, we operate on CPT. Now maybe that's Caribbean people's time, maybe it's colored people's time, but you know what time I'm talking about. But time is not simply just a measure of hours past. Time also describes the environment, the moment. Malcolm was a prophet, and the job of the prophet is to speak to the time, what the meaning of the time is, and what the people must do in response to the time. We know that time was an important theme in Malcolm's life, and he was known to always wear a watch. Malcolm was always stylish. Brother Minister was always stylish. But he didn't wear a watch so much out of fashion, but as much as it was about integrity. Malcolm says to us, I have less patience with someone who doesn't wear a watch than with anyone else. For this tie is not time conscious. In all our deeds, the proper value and respect for time determines success or failure. Really what Malcolm was saying is that time and how we manage time is an indication of integrity. And if we're going to move our people forward, if we're going to make the strides that we need to make, we have to be leaders and followers of integrity. Now today we have the benefit of mobile phones, and a lot of us don't wear watches necessarily, but the lesson from Malcolm about being where you say you're going to be when you say you're going to be there, about respecting other people and their time, the lesson remains the same. And so as we contemplate 100 years of Malcolm, it's important for us to understand the relationship that Malcolm had with time. And that's an example that all of us can follow. All of us want to be able to depend on people. All of us want to be able to trust people. All of us want to know that the folks in our lives, when they say yes, they mean yes, and when they say no, they mean no. Let me bring it home a little bit more. All of us are sick of leaders who say one thing and do another thing. All of us are tired of leaders who tell us that change is coming, but the only thing that changes is their own bank account. We're tired of that kind of leadership. And in order for us to move our people forward, we have to be developing leaders who are people of integrity. And Malcolm X, if he was nothing else, he was a man of integrity. Let me make it plain. Brother Malcolm liked to use that expression, make it plain. And this is what he said. He said, I'm for truth, no matter who tells it. I'm for justice, no matter who that justice is for or against. And it's that kind of integrity that we respect in Brother Malcolm. So often, white folks and even scared black folks said that Malcolm was a hater, said that Malcolm was divisive. But you never hear them talk about the fact that when Louise Langdon Little was pregnant with Malcolm X and her husband was away on business, her house was attacked and the windows and the doors were blown out. You never hear them say that this man that they claim is a hater lost his father to violence. You never hear them say that when they fled Omaha because the threat of violence, continued violence was too great, and they moved to Lansing, their house was burned down. You never hear anyone talk about all of the violence, the policy violence, the violence in the educational arena. Malcolm X wanted to be a lawyer, and he gave up on his dream because a teacher told him he was black, and so he could never be a lawyer. You never hear people who want to detract talk about all of the terrible things that happened to Malcolm, all of the things, all of the trauma that shaped his life. You never hear them talk about that. And as Ossie Davis pointed out, Malcolm X was a strong defender of our right to self-defense, but he was not a violent person. And so we have to be the ones who tell our own story. It's why it's so important for us to remember. It's why it's so important for us to gather to talk about Malcolm X and to talk about other leaders. Because if we leave it to people who don't care about our interests, people who operate outside of our community to tell us who our leaders are, we will continue to be hoodwinked. led astray, run amok, as Brother Malcolm would say. One of the things that I love about Malcolm X is that Malcolm X had clarity that is rare in the world. And he was able to offer an analysis, very complex geopolitical issues, and to take those issues and to make them plain for everyday people. And he was able to do that without tearing down other people. Malcolm X said to us, don't condemn if you see a person has a dirty glass of water. Just show them the clean glass of water that you have, and when they inspect it, you won't have to say yours is better. That seems like some very simple elementary teaching, something you learn in kindergarten or first or second grade. But it is the prescription for how we build black unity, how we build black unity in CARICOM, how we build black unity in the African Union, how we build black unity across the African world, and how we build black unity here at UWI, how we build black unity in our workplaces and in our families. What I love about Malcolm X is that despite all of the hate that he experienced, despite all of the betrayal that he experienced, despite all of the injustice of the world that he lived in, Malcolm was motivated by love. And this is a prime example of how we can acknowledge disagreement, how we can lift up other ideas or competing ideas without tearing sisters and brothers down. Malcolm X was a leader who called for black people to unite, and he consistently provided the examples for how we can do that. Malcolm X stood for the vulnerable. He says to us, I have no mercy or compassion in me for a society that will crush people and then penalize them for not being able to stand up under the weight. Too often policy is made from the vantage point or the viewpoint of those who are powerful, of those who are wealthy, of those who are secure. But Malcolm saw through this and made it very clear that as we pursue justice, we should always be on the side of the most vulnerable. We should always be on the side of the people who are crushed by society and then blamed for not being able to bear the weight of society. Malcolm X called for us to be principled. And in his words, he said it this way: a man who stands for nothing will fall for anything. And so this evening, here at the University of the West Indies, I ask each of us this question: what do you stand for? What do you stand for? What do you stand for? In remembering Malcolm X and reviewing his life and contemplating his story, it's just really armchair academia unless we're drawing the lessons, unless we're identifying the best practices from his life and from his way and asking, where am I in this equation? Am I a person of integrity? Am I someone who can be depended on? Am I someone who has the capacity to love even when I don't feel the love that I need and deserve? Do I speak up for the vulnerable when they're crushed by the powerful? Every day, we are given opportunities to be advocates for justice. Every single day. The smallest interactions you have are opportunities presented to us by our Creator, presented to us by our ancestors, to create a world of love, to create a world of justice. And often we hide. Often we run. Often we're afraid of the consequences or what the pushback will be on us. And that's the beauty of Malcolm X, because Malcolm X was courage for all of us. Malcolm X stood up and spoke truth to power and showed us that we could do that and that we could bind together in unity and that we could be strong against those who would desire that we wouldn't speak truth to power. So we have some understanding of who Malcolm X was. But what does that mean for us today? What does that mean for us in the context of artificial intelligence? How many of you all have seen a video on your phone or on your computer and been like, they said that? That's amazing. I can't believe that happened. Only to find out that you have been hoodwinked, that you have been misled, that you have been confused. Malcolm X calls us to have clarity and to use our critical thinking skills to discern between fact and fiction. I want to contribute to the conversation about Malcolm X and his journey through the Nation of Islam. But I have to start by saying, and for all of the parents and potential parents in the room, let this lesson from Malcolm's life be a lesson for you. It's important to plant seeds in your children's life. And they may stray from your teachings. They may stray from the things that you've instructed them. But if you plant the seeds, they can always come back home. And so we've heard from previous speakers this evening about the influence of Louise Langdon Little, the influence of Reverend Earl Little, the influence of people in Malcolm's community, and how they set the stage for his black nationalism, for his Pan-Africanism, and for his global citizenship, his universalism. But we have to give honor and respect where it's due. The Nation of Islam provided the environment where Malcolm could be reborn. The teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that were extended to Malcolm X while he was incarcerated, that was the life-giving truth that he needed at that time to become who he became. And I raise this because one of the beautiful things about Malcolm X is that no matter how many times he veered off course, no matter how many times he made mistakes, no matter how many times he missed the mark, he was always able to grow and to develop and to be reborn. Malcolm X was an autodidact. He was someone who was self-taught. And that's because he had a thirst for knowledge. But that doesn't have to be limited to Malcolm. That can be a lesson that we all take away from Malcolm. That we can stay on the right path. We can get back on the right path by pursuing knowledge, by acknowledging our mistakes, by seeking to grow. Do you know how many problems in the African world are simply the result of leadership ego? Of leaders being unable to say, I've made a mistake? Of leaders being unable to say, I'm wrong? Of leaders being unable to say, I'm sorry? Of leaders being unwilling to do the work to learn beyond their current knowledge base? What we need from academic institutions in the African world is professors and students who come together to solve the problems that our people are confronted with. Professors and students who come together to come up with sustainable plans for the development of the African world. If our universities, if our academic institutions are only there to produce competent black people who will make white people rich, then we've failed. And this is a question that as faculty members, as students, as members of the community, we can be asking every single day about the academic institutions in our community. What made Malcolm X a nationalist? Malcolm said he was a nationalist because he believed that black people ought to control the politics and the economics in our community. And every day, we ought to be asking, in Kingston and across Jamaica, are we controlling the politics and the economics of our community? At UWI, are we controlling the politics and the economics of this institution? Across the Caribbean, are we controlling the politics and the economics of our community? These are the critical questions. Malcolm has done his work, and he's left a path for us to follow. But we have to decide that we want to be people of integrity. We have to decide that we believe that we should control the politics and economics of our community. It's ironic that they called Malcolm X radical because he advocated that black people should have the right to educate their children, because he advocated that black people should be able to see currency recycled in their communities, because black people should not be exploited, because he advocated for self-defense. Which nation in the world wouldn't advocate for those things? By definition, a country is a country because it has the ability to defend its borders. A country is a country because it has an economy. And yet, so often, in Malcolm's time, and even in our time, our economies exist for the benefit of Europe. Our economies exist for the benefit of the United States. Our economies exist for the benefit of people who don't live in our communities. And today, the difference between today and 60 years ago is that the leaders of our community look like us. So the question is, will we rise up and be the voices that ask the questions that need to be asked, that demand integrity? This is the time, and this is why we celebrate Malcolm today, because his message is still extremely relevant. Yes, Malcolm was a nationalist, but he was also a Pan-Africanist, and it is evidenced by his trips to Africa. It is evidenced by the modeling of the Organization of Afro-American Unity after the African Union. When Malcolm announced that he was forming the OAAU, I don't know if many people know this, but the Organization of Afro-American Unity was not just for black people who lived in DC and the 50 states. The Organization for Afro-American Unity was designed to be a mass organization for all African people in the United States of America, but also African people in North America and Central America and South America, for African people in the Caribbean, and even for African people on the continent. And so in an age where we have the capacity to be more connected than ever, it begs the question, are we doing the level of organizing that Malcolm X did when he built so much of the Nation of Islam? Are we doing the level of organizing that the Honorable Marcus Garvey did when he had hundreds of thousands of people in the 20s join the UNIA? Today we have more money, we have more education, we have more connectivity. We have telephones, we have mail, but we also have the internet. We have social media, we have email, we have mobile phones. We have so many ways to connect with one another, so many ways to share information. And it's questionable as to whether or not we're doing half of what Marcus Garvey and Malcolm X did. So the question isn't just who was Malcolm X, but the question is, what will we do with the knowledge of who Malcolm X was. And with that, I'll close, but I hope that we, for a little while, can have some question and answer, some dialogue, some conversation in the community where everyone takes ownership of this process. All right?
All right, thank you. Let's give our keynote speaker, Reverend Kobi, another round of applause. Yes, thank you. We covered a lot of ground there, and one of the things that really struck home to me, Reverend Little, was your last comment that we live in this technological age, cell phones, internet, and all of that thing. I'm old enough to remember when no internet was around. In fact, people marvel when I went to high school, there wasn't a thing called a scientific calculator to use a slide rule and so forth. So I have seen this technological advance, but the more advanced we get, the more disconnected we are. To me, we seem to be closer, more intricately interwoven, tied to each other, despite the lack of technology. So I don't know. I mean, you know, the cell phone is a great technical aid and so forth, but I wonder in the digital age if it's caused a fracturing rather than real connectivity. But that's, you know, a philosophical issue that we don't have to debate now. But, you know, you touched the chord there, Reverend. Just how connected are we? Are we really have those same family ties we had prior to the digital age that we now find ourselves in the 21st century? But before we go into the question and answer, Brother Betty Payne has a poem he wants to share. I don't know if you can share it from this podium, and then we'll jump right in to a lively, I'm sure, question and answer session. So Brother Payne, Betty Payne, one of the notable poets we have, spoken word poets in Jamaica. Your time.
Michael Barnett, give thanks, you know. All the ones them gathered here, give thanks. Majesty. Let's see. Yeah, man, I'm give thanks to this opportunity because I want to tell you some Malcolm X is I and I favorite. One of I and I favorite Egungun. Natural, you know. Of course, none can take the space from Marcus Garvey. Is I? Fullness, you know. I, man. So we say we greet in the name of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie. Rastafari. More best as him nigga than a car. Balance. Yeah. And we are say, where I rebels them there. Two rebels last Bible already. Take to the hills. Come we till the dirty. Evacuate the state of emergency. Some nasty influences of flood we city. Youths plug into the cable. Regurgitate where they must see. I feel protect my baby. Dogs on the hunt to secure money. Nah, no sympathy. Siren only bring insecurity. No warrant, them wrong. Your slave laws don't apply to me. Up your craft, then give pass a Greco-Roman school. You have fetch your master's money. School loans, car loans, mortgages. You're not independent until we achieve food security. Not your roots from Pinnacle. Go relax, no argument. High altitude, far from idle. I feel of endeavors until I sip. What kind of orientation I go on a school? Not to do a ramp. Is who them want recruit. You could have sent all your troops. You can't uproot. I Pinnacle roots. Where I rebel them there. For certainty say, Rome nah get where? Deny Garvey entry to Liberia. It's so them deny your visa up till today. Meantime, spring break a regular the tropics. Youth and the day, go on like you know see, say, Rome want kill we off. Over the years, Rasta camp them raid. So them want friend we all police stop shave. Still a cut down I kush. You now cultivate civilization. You give up I continent now for which island? Burn a bossy slave. The class system create. The same way the plantation operate. The field slave. The police get paid to make sure the field slave behave. And it never change. Not your roots from pinnacle. Go relax, no argument. I attitude far from idle. I feel of endeavors until I sip. No backdoor deal. Integrity, as the king said forward. It's the majesty, Rastafari.
Now we're going to open up for the question and answer session. Real quick, Mr. Palmer, do we have another microphone around here? We're going to use another one for the audience. And feel free to ask any questions that you may have. I'm going to try to moderate and to kind of keep an eye on who raises their hand first and so forth. Hopefully, you know, it will work out. So, anyone feel inspired to ask a question? All right, hand is raised. Could you give the gentleman the mic? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You were speaking about the issues of the AI. It is like things are developing to a frightening stage. Yes, it is good in one sense because it can help scientists to do research and come up with new findings. But on the dark side of it, it's frightening. You know, because I mean, governments can now use it to have their armies using it to fight wars for them. You know, so it's frightening. And then you're talking about academic integrity because parents now using it for their children to do their homework and so on. So the children are trained to think like in our time. The computers doing all the thinking for them. How do you deal with these issues?
All right. Question about AI, modern technology. Anybody want to take that question? Well, I can say something, and I'm going to put myself out there on the line, that I am, you know, not a big fan of AI as far as academic integrity is concerned anyway. So that's created a dilemma within the school, you know, environment, and that now we live in a time where people feel impelled or they feel coerced, if you like, to use AI to write their work for them, to write essays. You can generate pretty much anything. But the question is, who is then the real author? Because when we talk about authorship, when we talk about critical thinking, how does AI contribute to critical thinking? In fact, I think it actually dulls down critical thinking. But I could write a whole paper on that, so I'm not going to say too much. But I don't know if any of our panelists here have anything to say. But in the educational arena, I have qualms about AI. Yes, it's useful in terms of, you know, generating different possibilities or solving maybe some equations or something like that. But in terms of original thought, you know, authorship, if you're trying to generate and to communicate your own personal thoughts, I don't think it will sharpen it. It's a shortcut, but yeah. Anyone on the panel?
Yeah, so we can't put the AI milk back in the carton. It's spilled, it's out there, it's here. But the question is, do we have the maturity and the integrity to use it appropriately? And that's why it's important to look at leaders like Malcolm X and to extract the lessons that we can learn from their lives. You know, I started out this talk this evening, talking about Malcolm X as a man of integrity and about how he used his watch and time as an expression of that integrity. So, are we going to be hardworking people, people who have integrity, or are we going to be lazy people? Are we going to be people who try to take shortcuts? Malcolm X said to black people in the United States, you didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on you. And that was a challenge for African Americans to develop a proper analysis when it comes to our identity and our history. And it calls for us to be critical thinkers. In a world where AI is dominant, we have to insist and hold each other accountable to being critical thinkers. We have to approach the world around us with a level of skepticism, but really more than skepticism, we have to be intentional about seeking clarity. So often we want to allow other people to do our thinking for us. We want to find the easiest and the quickest way, the most convenient process for getting done whatever needs to get done. But Malcolm X calls for us to pursue knowledge, to be people of integrity, and to be people who are critical thinkers. You can get a whole lot of information through pursuing knowledge, but if you're not a critical thinker, you can't process that information properly. And that's the challenge that AI throws in the lap of every single person that has a mobile phone. Every time you open up your screen, AI has the potential to show you a video or present you a document that is designed to do social engineering, designed to shape a worldview that may or may not be in our interest. So humans are the creators of computers. We have to be clear that we won't cede our power to computers or to people who seek to manipulate computers so that they can dominate our communities.
AI is a tool. From a Garvey perspective, I think Marcus Garvey would encourage us to use the tools at our disposal for the cause of African redemption. What's interesting, though, is that systems, as they've evolved in this current global standing, are developed to control. And I think now more than ever, especially with the development of artificial intelligence, in some ways it will allow for humanity to really define its own purpose and existence on earth. I say this to people all the time when they quote systems to me. Well, that's what the law says, or that's what the rule says. And I often ask, well, where is the humanity in your judgment if you're simply quoting words on a paper? You know, a police stopped me the other day and told me he's going to give me a ticket for not putting on my indicator when I change lanes. And I said to him, but officer, before I changed lanes, I looked in the mirror and there was a car coming. It passed me, and I looked again, there was another car coming. It passed me, and then I looked again and there was no car, and I changed lanes. So I said, who would I be putting on the indicator for? Well, that's what the law said. I said, well, the law is written so that people are protected from me causing accidents or problems on the road. I said, in a situation like this, what is the difference between what you're doing and what the AI would do? The AI can only read what the law is saying, but you're the human being. You observed that there was no vehicle behind me. Does that really warrant giving me a ticket? So, and then I asked him another question. I said, if I was driving alone in the middle of the night at 2:30, no car on the road, and I changed lanes and you saw me without using an indicator, would you stop me and give me a ticket? You know what the man said? He said, yes, that's what the law said. I said, well, within a year or two, you're going to be out of a job. Because what you're saying is what the AI can do. What I need you to be is a human being, because that is something that the AI cannot do, right? And I was at painstaking ends to make him understand. I mean, it's a $2,500 ticket. I still have to pay it. I didn't get out of the ticket. But what I was trying to communicate to him was important. I think in this day and age, as the brother said, the AI is doing the homework for your kids, because I observe how my children are doing homework in a much different way than I remember doing homework myself. But I think as educators, it allows us to evaluate. You remember one time, I don't want to give away my age, but remember there was one time where you couldn't carry the calculator to the school, you couldn't have it in the class. It's a calculator, right? Those days are far. Now the educational system is structured that they need the calculator. My son just started high school, and one of the requirements is you must have a laptop or a tablet. You must, right? I think it also allows educators now to also begin to look back at some of the things that AI cannot teach our children that need to be taught. Our baby spoke about food security. For a number of years, because of the colonial system, we're focused on training our students to, as Reverend Little was saying, to produce for others and to fit an economic worldview. We have a generation now that believes that food comes from the supermarket. And in the schools, we are not focusing on teaching children even how to grow food anymore. So now that we have the AI that can read the literature book for us, we have the AI that can do the math comprehensions, maybe it's time for the educators now to take the time to go back to the simple things, like teaching children how to take a seed, put it in the ground. That needs to be incorporated into the curriculum, among with other essential things. Before the apocalypse happens, right? And nobody don't know if we grow food, and half the world population going to be wiped out because of whatever causes that. Remember, I said the AI can't grow the food, and it can't eat the food either.
Thank you for that. Any, there must be some question. Yes, so I'm going to take butter, and then I'll take bread lumps. Yeah.
Greetings one and all. How do I them? Give thanks for life, Without life won't be present. Big up the panel set speed. Yes, I. Well, give thanks for the gathering. Because as Rasta people, sometimes Babylon don't have no intention. But because we have good intention, we will just display it the best way we can. Not true? Rastafari. Again, finish with a question. But before the question, the IA thing, it there with me, can't rub it out, we have to find a balance. Because balance are the key. The school is one, but I think a bigger part than the school is the institution of parenting. The first learning comes from the home. So it depends now on the environment that the home creates. I think that's very important. Parents need to get active. What enough parents do, they buy these gadgets and give their children. Some of them don't know how to even operate it. And because of that, the children them sometimes get very smart, smarter than the parent. You see what I talk about? So we mean that we're as good as them, but we need to know something about it that we can supervise them to ensure that them don't go overboard. I think that's a key element in this whole situation, because we are now in the computer age and we have to accept it. But we have to find a way, not just to accept it, but to help us to move forward. Because as the Rastaman say, forward ever, backward never, and that make we clever. Not true? posing a question to the panel and to my brethren and sisters. Because recently I was in a discussion with some of my brethren. Some of them aren't really Rasta like myself. However, them guys, they really have a high knowledge of certain things, you know? Some schoolmate and all them things there. Now, at one time, there was a AOU conference wherein all the heads of Africa meet to make a decision about the United States of Africa, including His Majesty, Gaddafi, and them people. Not true? No, I cannot have it different. But something was posed in the meeting to I. And I know, sir, when I come to the internet, like YouTube and certain things, there's enough misinformation and disinformation. So you have to know where do we go in them places, because they still have good information. But enough people to me don't really enlightening in doing research. And I think research is very important. And research is not only on YouTube and them things there, because enough people nowadays feel to read. And books are still available. Libraries are there. The historical contents are there. That's why I say to create the balance. Yes, you can Google this and Google that, fine. But Google itself, it tell us, if you have information with them that have, you can give them. Not true. So the key to me is to be a person who loves to research, whatever the topic may be. That's what Marcus and them man there was. Not true. That's what Malcolm X was. That's what Martin Luther King was. Them man the research who them I deal with in order to push the thing forward and give explanation to whosoever their crowds are. Now, the brethren them said to I, Gaddafi licked against His Majesty because His Majesty failed to vote in order to enhance the United States of Africa. Now, I don't have it that way, but that's what was said. And I know them get it from somewhere. That means it is out there. Now, if any one of the brethren or sisters have any form of information on that conference, I would like something to be said, because I think the truth must be known. And I know when black leaders rise, the West always find a way to put down them people that somehow with false information. So if anyone of the brethren and sisters in them have information of such, in which I don't have that information, because a different information I personally have, I'd like somebody to say something on the matter. Give thanks.
All right, so I'm going to let Dreadlocks ask his question, and then we roll everything together. But let me just say this, though, is we're going to go, I want to get as many people in as possible, so I want everyone to be disciplined with their questions. So please, going forward, make it more of a question and a commentary, if possible, you know. Commentary is good, but I'd like to get some exchange with the panelists. But in a nutshell, you want to know if Gaddafi lick against Haile Selassie. That's your question, right, Butter? Because it's a whole heap of things. If His Majesty quote against Gaddafi?
Yeah, no, against United Africa to be a United States of Africa.
Well, I can answer that in a nutshell. His Majesty was very responsible for the formation of the OAU. If it wasn't for Haile Selassie I, it wasn't a coincidence the OAU, Organization of African Unity, is formed in Ethiopia, and the headquarters is Addis Ababa, because Haile Selassie was the father of Africa in 1963, unequivocally. So it was he who was able to bring the light, the Moravian group with the Casablanca group. The Casablanca was pro-federated states of Africa, and the Moravian group was for independent nation states. So he was able to form a middle ground and have all of the different nations, the free, liberated nations at that time, but not all of the nations of Africa were free in 63, to come together and have the OAU. So he never looked against it, he was responsible for it. All right, to answer that. So, Dreadlocks, you have a question?
Yeah, not a question, but just to add to the discussion, you know. I am Dreadlocks from iYard Radio, also representing the Association of Rastafari Creatives. We spoke about AI, and, you know, it came to me just here. This seems to become, or it's becoming a black people problem, really. Because I don't see the Chinese worrying about AI. I don't see the Indians worrying about AI. What I see they do, though, is have a complete different approach towards it. And when I reflect now and looking on my, you know, just experience and knowledge, race first, we need to know about AI. We need to study AI. And in studying this AI, those who are able to sponsor individuals who can create content that speak to our history. So what about the Malcolm X animation flick that can be easily created through the same AI? What about using some of those Anansi stories and creating? One of the things that, you know, our ancestors speak of is what of our own. Marcus Garvey asks, where are our, you know, radio stations, where are our police? And this is why iYard Radio is here, because we are now looking at AI, establishing our own station that reflects us, that speak to our needs. You know what I mean? So I would see this as a charge for all of us in this room here, although we are mixed age, but for all of us to do some kind of research on some kind of AI that can be used to enhance your life firstly, then your family, then your community, and then teach them now, bring together this Malcolm X principles, the Garvey principles, the Haile Selassie, and find out what is that unifying things that will then lead us to plant the seed. Because as tying everything and bringing a total balance to what is going on, you know, Abebe Payne spoke of food sovereignty. What is food sovereignty? But in order for our people to know what that is, let us use the AI to bring them up to that level of understanding or overstanding, because that is where we're lacking. We're just fearing it. But if we can pump, if all of us in here establish a YouTube, TikTok page, and we spend our money, right, to bombard everyone with that content. When our youth go onto the internet, they will always see, like, I never knew TV or Rastafari TV, or that is how we want to use the AI. So, you know, we don't want to make this into a black people problem. And this is what I see going on, where we seem to fear AI the most. When in China, they're using TikTok to make great inventions. In India, they're using AI to come to build businesses and to, you know what I mean? So, you know, not to, yeah? So give thanks, give thanks.
So I'm trying to see the order, the hands have shut up now. So I hope, you know.
I'm going to say this quickly, very short. Surflex is here. Surflex is a reggae dancehall artist who used to act in the famous Royal Palm Estate. Surflex is the artist who also used to manage by Honorable Oliver Babs Grange once. Alright. Brown Rasta, in the black time over here, just said something a while ago, which expect the panel to answer it. But the experience of how to explain the team, he speak about parents to teach children at home, and every day parents get their custody. So me have to answer this for the Rasta and for the panel. I'm an artist who do school tour with every radio station in Jamaica. Richie B, name it, all of them. When the parents teach your children in the house, how to move, how to walk, how to talk, how to eat, everything. When they go to school, they move different. I do school tour and experience and see how they move. When they're in the house, they say, brother, what? When that's a girl. When they're in the school, them say, hey, my girl, hey! It's a different type of talking because they're with their friend. So no matter what you teach them at home, when they reach at school, a total different person. So it's not the parents trying to do it. And I see parents getting peer cuss for this every day. But because of the people not going to the school and see, and on the road when you're taking bus, you can see it for yourself. All right? So don't fire me just answer you because you said that to the panel and I don't know if the panel would have known what me just said a while ago. If they had the experience like I have, that's why I choose to explain out that. Okay, I have the experience when I deal with basic. Yeah. All right? Blessings.
All right, good
you know, medical.
This brother over here, can I just hear from him before we say more? Thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody. So this question is specifically for Stephen and for you, Dr. Barnett. And I ask you in your capacity as educators. So tonight is about the 100th anniversary of the birth of Malcolm X. Yeah. And Stephen, I listened to him on the radio and I listened to him tonight. And he took us on a journey explaining to us, the significance of a Malcolm X within the wider context of a Marcus Garvey, and how Marcus Garvey inspired Malcolm X, how Marcus Garvey essentially was responsible for Malcolm X having introduced his parents to each other. And I was fascinated, I was riveted listening to that journey. And in addition to being fascinated and riveted, I'm also disturbed because I'm a 50-odd-year-old man and I was 2 years old when I learned that story. And I'm saying now, we talk about our national hero, Marcus Garvey. How many people who know that Marcus Garvey was our national hero knew that Marcus Garvey was responsible for Malcolm X? How many people knew that? I didn't know that. And I'm 50 years old. And so I'm interested to hear from you two as educators what your perspective is on how we change that cycle for the next generation. Because I have 2 6-year-old sons, and I wouldn't like my sons to be 50-odd before they learn this. And I know that I will have part of that responsibility, but I'm interested to hear what your perspectives are on how the system in which you guys are part of, because you are at the university level and Professor Golden is at another level. But I'm interested to hear your perspective on how we can change the system so that this knowledge is passed to our children, because we talk about crime and violence is largely a perspective of the kind of respect that we have for ourselves and for each other. And if you don't teach your children and the next generation about their history and about the greatness of themselves. Marcus Garvey was one of us.
Yes. Well, very quickly, I will say this, that it takes a village to raise a child. And there are quite a few of us, but maybe we haven't reached that point where this nation becomes saturated with this appreciation of black history, black heroes, and celebrating our great achievements of the past, really embolden black pride. Because even though Marcus Garvey is our first national hero, a lot of people don't know about this. Now, my thing is I teach African Diaspora Studies class, and I have a multitude of different students who come and take the class. Some have some prior knowledge, about, you know, Marcus Garvey, Nani, even our national heroes, next to no knowledge for most of the class. So it's a process. Now, I have seen firsthand, though, that you have some who genuinely really are making the effort to try to bring up their knowledge levels, because they're not taught this at secondary level, they're not taught at primary. So we have to revamp, those of us who are in the positions of influence, revamp our educational system. That is one of the repairs we need to do, because if what we learn is European history, we don't have any Caribbean history or any African history, we don't have a holistic feel of the world, we're doing ourselves a disservice. So what is happening here is history is not mandatory, you know, in secondary schools, right? So at least in my time, history was mandatory, and I had a wide range of classes, from history to the sciences, you know, French, Spanish, whatever. But that historical foundation. The other thing is that my parents were part of the Black Power movement. So when I grew up, Malcolm X is on the wall, Angela Davis is on the wall, you know, Kwame Nkrumah is there and all of that. So I grew up in that environment. So obviously it had an impact on me. I don't know how many other households, though, in Jamaica would have been in that environment. So you're a product of your environment. So if the parents don't have that kind of upbringing or that kind of leaning, then the children are unlikely to have it. So it begins at home, but also the community you live in. What are the kind of, what is the nourishment, mental nourishment people get in the communities? You know, what has happened, I think, unfortunately, and AI can be used in a positive way, but unfortunately, that's not the case. I think what is happening, and we'll hear from other people, is a dumbing down of certain concepts, ideas, and everything. So everything is going to the lowest denominator. And we're not being encouraged to think on the highest possible platitude, you know, because human beings, when you think about it, our limitless possibilities that the mind could rise to, well, you have to have that stimulation to do so. So if you're where it's just sex and violence, that's all you are, exposed to. Or are you going to think on a higher level or resonate on a higher frequency? So I let Stephen respond, and then let's see 2, 3 hands, 4 hands, and then we'll take those 4.
Let me be as quick as I can, because Breadlocks hit the point. This generation is this is the age of information, and this is a digital generation. One of the things I do in teaching teachers is how to respond to the age that they're in. 2 years ago, we started a screenwriters workshop. We did it 2 years at the Michael University College. This year, we're moving it to Edna Manley. It's actually week after next, June 3rd and 4th. The idea behind it was, one, I was encouraging teachers to look into content creation. One of the reasons is we don't pay teachers what we should be paying them, and the profession is losing its appeal, and we're not getting the quality teachers we need going through the system anymore because of the earning power. And I suggested this as a way for those who love the profession like myself, but still want to pay a mortgage, drive a nice car, take your family on vacation and be able to afford it. This was a way to supplement your income, right? A lot of the things that I teach about, for example, I used to ask teacher students, who is the first black teacher in Jamaica? I'm going to ask you all this. Anybody know who the first black teacher was in Jamaica? This is a man named Francis Williams, right? Out of Spanish Town. He went to the University of Cambridge in the 1720s. A black man, you know, at Cambridge. In fact, I'm working with a team in the UK to put up a plaque for him at Cambridge, because Cambridge is now accepting the fact that he was there, but when they didn't before. Part of the problem is, you're asking why we don't know these connections like about Garvey, is because of the colonial curriculum that we come from, and the fact that it has always sought to suppress and downplay the achievements and the contributions of black people, right? For example, Christopher Columbus himself wrote in his diaries that the Taino people told him about the Malians who used to come across the ocean and trade with them. They told him that, you know, that you're not the first person to come by sea, black people. But yet that has been left out of our history books when we teach our children. But a lot of these things that I discovered, and I used to create awe in a room when I brought them up. People are like, what? I never heard that before. I myself today am finding those things on the internet. In these little what you call them breadlocks, you know, these little 1 minute, 2 minute things with the AI talking about. Look up Francis Williams on YouTube now and you'll find it. 10 years ago, you'd have to read in an encyclopedia and dig down Cambridge to find out. I used to come into a room like, yo, I know I have knowledge that people don't have. But people are using the technology to get it out there. And I'm not mad at them. I'm not mad at them, but what I'm saying to teachers is you need to up your game. So even this thing I'm talking about, relationship between Marcus and Malcolm. Last year we screened the first film on Marcus Garvey, right? Mosiah, the film. We're working on a sequel. And the things I spoke about tonight, the relationship between Malcolm and Marcus is going to be the backdrop of that sequel. We're going to be looking at the UNIA and Ku Klux Klan rivalry, but we're going to be using Malcolm and Malcolm's family as an example in the story. Now, these kids are not going to the library like we did, where you get one book and it tell you, say, go look for them 3 books here. And you go look for them 3 books and you get piece of knowledge, you get piece of... These young generation, if them can't press a button and get it in 1 minute, them not in it. So as teachers, we can't complain about that. What we have to do is go and create these 1 minutes for them to get the real story, as the brother is saying. So I fully support what he's saying, but teachers have to be up on the technology and we have to be willing to embrace it, right? You can't be looking at, you know, Marcus Garvey in the first lesson in the School of African Philosophy was called Universal Intelligence and Knowledge and How to Get It. And he was telling people in his generations, read. You can have as much knowledge as the doctor or the lawyer by reading the books that they read. Keep reading. Don't waste your time reading fiction. That was his lesson. In this time, what we have to do as teachers is put this content out there so that the young people can get it, right? So that these people are not forgotten. One of my nursery rhymes is about Cuba Cornwallis. You know how many Jamaicans have never even heard that name? And this was a powerful woman in the 1780s. There was one little sign for her at Port Royal. When the pair came, the sign came down. I said to the Minister of Culture myself, listen, if something is not put up back for her, a whole generation is going to forget this woman. Because, of course, the British didn't put her in our history books to tell us about her. They know about her, you know. You can go to the British Museum and find the letters that the King of England wrote to this black woman in Port Royal, right? But you're not finding them in our history book, because at the time that our curriculum was given to us, they didn't want anything that affected our minds in terms of not seeing ourselves as subservient to white supremacy. They pulled it out. This is why they suppressed the teachings of Marcus Garvey, right? So teachers have to learn and they have to use the tools at their disposal, and don't be afraid of the technology, because these kids will leave you behind. That's all they do is they need it instantly. Blip, 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 blip. You know what I mean?
One of the things that Malcolm would say if he were here today is, if you want to change the policy, you need to join an organization so that organization can work to change the policy. So I want to encourage everyone to take that as a lesson from Malcolm X as well, that it's important to have opinions about things and take positions on issues, but the real work gets done in organizations. So join an organization, whether it's UNIA or Teachers Union or some other organization, even your worship community, These are organizations, and when we're united, we have more strength, and your organizations can push the policymakers to change the policy. Malcolm X stood for black control of black communities. What we're hearing, what we're talking about this evening is that even though Jamaica is a sovereign state, Jamaicans don't control the content of the curriculum. And if you want to honor Malcolm's life, one of the ways that you can do that is join an organization and change that.
Thank you for that. And let's keep Malcolm in the mix, this being a centenary, because one of the things, based on what Reverend Little just said, is united we stand, divided we fall. So what's happening is we become more individualized. That is the trajectory we're on, you know. We're in our little silos and this and that. So what organizations we belong to that have power, because there is power in numbers, you know, but the organizations are dwindling, if anything. I want people to reflect on the one thing. Marcus Garvey had a membership. This is an undercount, very conservative, 6 million members is UNIA. This is before AI, before technology, before internet, and all of that. How on earth could he have achieved that? How many of us could say we have, or we belong to an organization 6 million strong? So in other words, are we going forwards, are we going backwards? You know, time for reflection. Maybe we're a little bit too comfortable in our existence, because if he could do this, my mind is still blowing, you know. 100 years ago, no internet, no electronic gadgetry, and you have organization 6 million strong as a conservative undercount. So we have 4 people. So we have to start thinking on that higher plane, on a level. But one of our problems today, and this is where looking at black history is important, and let's look at Malcolm X and so forth. But this unity is an issue we still suffer from today. I just want us, one thing, I'm going to put that, you know, a little apostrophe on that one. But we have 4 hands raised, so let's try and take that, because we really, you know, need we have a curfew here at UNIA. Let me just tell you that. You probably don't know that. Really, 9 o'clock is the curfew, and we're coming up to that. So, and there's food and beverages and like a little downtime if possible, but, you know, so we have to be a little stringent with the time. So, I know there are 4 hands raised, the brother here, this brother, you have the mics, and you, Brother Payne. So let's just get all of the comments and questions and then try to deal with it. So you, first, yes, your time. No, use the mic, man, I can't hear you.
Is it on?
Is it on? It's not on. No.
Thanks. Good evening. Many of the questions, the answers.
Either it's not on and I'm using it, man. Switch it on. Oh.
Battery gone.
Mic check 1, 2. Thanks. The time from my hand was up, a lot of the answers came through. And to Dr. Golden, I heard you mention about the nursery rhymes, and I was thinking that you're on your way to a curriculum. Out of many one people, and how do we determine the amount? Not only the amount, especially the significance of and the importance of Marcus and Malcolm, as I say, but how do we determine the amount of representation in the curriculum, especially concerning the majority of people and out of many one?
You know,
how and who
what's the rule of democracy? Majority rule, right? Yeah, well, we're from a country, I think the actual figures is some 93 point something % African descendant. What is really strange about our country is that I think it's something like 85% of the wealth is concentrated in the hands in the other 6 point something %, right? That's what's strange. So we don't need to ask about how, listen, don't let them oversell this out of many one people, you know. I don't know where that attains anywhere else, right? And the fact is, because of the system of colonialism that we come out of, the European element has overcompensated for so many centuries that we don't need to apologize when we decide we're going to inject the Afrocentricity into our curriculum. And we don't have to be afraid to do that. So I have taken, I don't know how many nursery rhymes it is. Like I turned the old woman in the sea into a nursery rhyme about Cuba Cornwallis. You know, I took Baba Black Sheep and I turned it into Bobo Ashanti. I took the Grand Old Duke of York and turned it into the Great Ras Makonnen. You know, I took Hey Diddle Diddle and turned it into Hey Jinga Jinga, Angolan Queen Nzinga. So it's all African, it's all Jamaican. You know, I took how it go? Simple Simon Meta Pieman. I took that and turned it into Dirty Bookman Meta Footman. Right? That's about Haiti. Others are about Jamaica. Some are about Africa. But these are the stories. Before I wrote these, you know, I looked at the history of some of these nursery rhymes. Like London Bridge is Burning Down was written when London Bridge was actually burnt down, 1744. Right? Mary, Mary, quite contrary, which I changed to Nanny, Nanny, quite uncanny, was about Mary, Queen of Scots, and her fascination with a new thing the French had developed, which was the guillotine. You know, cockle bells, cockle shells, and what, you know, was about chopping people's heads off. You know, Jack be nimble, Jack be quick was about a notorious British pirate that kept escaping from the Tower of London. So their nursery rhymes are actually based on their stories. We don't have to, I am saying why we teaching Jamaican kids that, right? So my things are about Jackman's song, you know, Rastafari, because that is indigenous to Jamaica as well. I have one in there, you know, Little Miss Muffet sat down. I changed that to Little Miss Lou was cooking her stew, right? With carrots and dumpling, you know? Yeah, things that which Jamaican kid eats curds and whey? I never even know what curds and whey was till I was a grown man. I thought it was Little Miss Muffet sat down on her tuffet eating her curls away. I used to say that my whole life. It's not till I grow big and realize that curds and whey was an actual British breakfast that them used to eat. We don't eat curds and whey, so why are we teaching our children those nursery rhymes? And why we should make excuses or apologies for making our nursery rhymes be about our experience as Jamaicans, right? And people always ask this question, well, what about, why it have to be African? All the time, black people are the first people to be trying to apologize and ask why. When the white people were subjecting us, they never asked themselves why. They must teach us only their thing, because it was their thing. They owned it. And they owned it so much they pushed it onto the rest of the world. We're Africans, as Peter Tosh said. We must not be afraid to own ourselves, accept our identity, and push our identity out. Jamaicans are very good at doing that, you know, naturally. We go into a country and rather than assimilate to that culture, we make the whole country assimilate to us. Go to Britain and hear the talk on the street from a handful of Jamaicans that go there. They might talk about them and them. Right? Go to Shashamani and see the little Ethiopian children running around saying, Wagwan in, Rastaman. Because a few Rasta go over there from Jamaica, and so we have to take it to the next level, right? And we have, as Garvey was saying, Africa for the...
Yeah. All right, let's get in the other comments real quick. You have a mic? Yeah. Yes, so you and then... yes, yeah, carry on.
All right. So good night, everybody. All right. So I have a quick question to ask, and it is about entertainment in the black community. So entertainment is not really a bad thing per se. As you know, you have a lot of movies creative things in it that are really...
It's not a bad thing at all.
Yes.
We need entertainment.
Yes. But one of the things I really want to focus on is something I watched a YouTube video about recently, and it brought about something that I didn't really think about before consciously. And it said that throughout the world, it's like black people, we are good at creating things and creating music and so on. But it's almost like we are also somewhat attracted to certain forms of entertainment, like a niche within our culture. And I began to realize that in some cases, this can even disconnect us from the unity that people like Malcolm X was talking about. We are very distracted almost, to a sense, in the sense that like we don't wish to attend these type of events and so on. And the fact that we are going to more deviant type of characteristics and culture. I remember even up to yesterday, somebody was saying that there's now becoming a deviance between that they can't really tell the difference between R&B and hip hop anymore. Nobody's talking about love and unity anymore. Everybody's talking about dancehall culture and woman of wine and what they're wearing and so on. So it's like these things are almost distracting from us and taking away the unity we could be having right now. So why it's not a bad thing, I want to know. The question is, what would you either change or try to deviate from the black culture right now to help entertainment either fit us to become more unified or to just kind of take away from it?
I get what you're saying. So I'm going to, thanks for that. I will get the other comment here and then one other one here and then we just take everything together. Thank you. Yes, sir, brother.
Good night, everyone. So my question is directed toward the panel, of course. In the pursuit of uniting black people, and as I think Reverend Little mentioned before, you know, Malcolm X really focused on, you know, getting resources in the black community, recycling resources. How do you navigate a society that is very, very unforgiving as to why there's a lack of these resources? How do we go about getting those resources? Simple as just us becoming owners and then hiring only black people. I just want to know how you navigate that, because, for example, most people, as I said before, are unforgiving as well as ignorant as to why these situations persist. Because, for example, most people don't know that the reason why Haiti is in the state that it is because they had to be paying reparations for so long to France, even after getting independence, or why many people in America, the communities, or South Africa, are in the states that they are right now because how they were built was geared towards that. So how do you navigate that?
How do you navigate the disinformation and replace it with real information? That's what you want to, that's your question.
As well as I said before, how do you then retake that? You know,
I think the first thing is we have to have the expectation that our community deserves those resources. As we speak, Europe, America, and China continue to divide up the African world, the continent of Africa, just like in the late 1880s with the Berlin Conference, and making plans for how they're going to extract resources from where we live. Malcolm X said that land is the basis of independence. It is off of the land that you can produce economic activity that will create the wealth that we need to sustain ourselves and to move ourselves forward. We so often chase after white people, their ideas, and their resources, and don't pay ourselves what we're willing to pay them. And so the first change that has to happen is that we have to decide that we're worthy. We have to decide that we're willing to trust each other, that we're willing to work with each other, that we're willing to make the sacrifices that ultimately will bring the rewards to our communities. Right now, if you're given the choice to travel, are you choosing to travel to Europe, or are you choosing to travel to somewhere in the African world? That's a question that each of us has to answer. What is our orientation? Do we believe in Africa? Do we believe in African people? There are 1 billion people on the continent of Africa. There are 1 billion people. Africa is the youngest continent in the world. The population is the youngest. It is going to be the market of the future. It's really the market of right now. How many of us are trying to do business in Africa? How many of us are willing to engage our communities in Africa in a respectful way so that we can build economies that meet all of our needs? That's the question. We've always had the potential. We've always had the human potential, the intellectual capital, and all of the natural resources are there. But the question is, do we believe, as Malcolm pointed out, that the white man's ice is colder? Or do we believe that black people are inherently just as talented and capable as anyone else? Are we willing to invest in ourselves?
Okay, I'm going to take from Brother Payne, and then we'll just, address questions as best possible. Yes, all right. Someone give the mic to Malik, please. Thank you.
King was responding.
About the entertainment thing, yeah. Betty, yeah. Could you, we're trying to wrap up.
Go ahead.
Ask the question. Yes, thank you.
Selassie, blessed all ones. Blessings. All right, so it's a question and to all the ones, but particularly maybe to the Clive Mohammed, yes. Majestic, and the brother as a UNIA president, ISIS. Particularly against you two organizations targeting black people, what we call black people around the world. Is the question is significant most to, but I ask the I as well. Particularly, all right. We grew up with a kind of a pop culture understanding, and a whole heap of way grew up with certain little things. As I say, 93% black people in Jamaica, right? And yet 6% of the place, of the people of a different race control up most of the resources. And people are still compliant in perpetuating this maneuver of wealth, this maneuver of resources and all of these things. We're compliant to that. Now, your two organizations particularly are built to addressing those things, right? And so, may I say, what are some of the strategies that them are used today, really? See? For bring about a kind of awareness for no say, for real, like, particularly today then, right? You have a person like a Malcolm X come up and somewhat discarded by your organization, and then him still remain Muslim no matter what, right? Him a Muslim to the end, right? But when him become political, on a show him out certain way. Same thing happened with Khalid Mohammed, right? When him become certain political, on a show him out because him address certain things politically about black people, right? So what are some of the things them you use strategically now? See? If you address them political issues that were still relevant to it now, we might talk about, see? And align yourself as a nation, then have black people, see? If you say, bring that awareness, where them two things that they bring forward, out of the eye them teaching, same way. If you address the population where compliant in them owner, we are calling it now disenfranchisement. And I suppose it addressed to the eye same way, because I same way the UNIA show out Marcus. And Marcus said, nah, come back here. I never get to come back here neither. See it? So what are the strategies now where I go address? Because Marcus was able to do it and bring that type of awareness to it. 6 million as him point out. See? So what are the strategies now for bring that awareness? Because certain people not have so much faith in the eye them. Like one time.
All right,
okay.
Thank you for that question. So here's what's going to happen right now. We're going to have here Minister Clive address part of your question, and Stephen can address the other part, the UNIA part, and then Stephen wants to play a short clip on Malcolm X to address the entertainment question that we came in, you know? Huh?
Question or comment?
We really don't have time, so it would be better to have the question. Wait a minute. Yeah, seriously. Yeah, we have. I said it about 10, 15 minutes ago. So this is where we have to get kind of disciplined, because we're in a space here where there's limitation.
30 seconds for my question. My quick question here.
All right, may I just quickly, on the brother, read the question of entertainment. I would just say it like this, that the entertainment industry has been captured and weaponized to use against black people in particular. The music has been weaponized,
the movies, the movie industry has been weaponized, and for our entertainers, for our athletes, they themselves are actually living on a plantation, because the owners of those leagues and teams and whatever it is are mainly Jews. Let me just say it like it is. Mainly Jews. So mainly Jews are the distributors, the managers, the promoters of our music, and they determine what goes out to keep us again divided and keep us ignorant, lacking a knowledge of self. Now, as far as my brother and your question, the Nation of Islam is an institution where there are laws, just like the minister instructed me on what not to say when I get here tonight or this evening. The nation has laws, rules, regulations, and if we break those laws, unlike many other organizations, we get put out. For particular laws which you break, you may get 3 months, 6 months, a year, up to 5 years. So it's not about Brother Malcolm and Brother Khalid getting political and getting time out. It's instructions that were given, and if you break these instructions or violate them, you get time out. The difference is that with Brother Malcolm, they were what you would call those who would stand at the door to block the re-entry of them coming back in, because you always have gatekeepers. In every organization, you have those who would envy you for your particular gift and talent, and so they would block you from getting back to the leader, because if you got back to the leader, then your position, your former position, you may get back to that. And so they were gatekeepers with Brother Malcolm and also with Dr. Khalid. That's how I would answer that, brother.
Yeah, to what you're saying, remember, that in Garvey's time, and this is combining what this brother was also saying too, the entertainment factor plays heavily in terms of black culture, and that's not just in Jamaica alone. That is right around the world. In Garvey's time, that was part of his genius and his mastery. The way he brought the entertainment factor, the uniforms, the parades, the bravado, the oratory is what attracted black people to his movement. And so he used it to move the message. And the message, of course, was black unity, was African empire, was, black economic. So it worked for him. The reason we have a lot of issues as a community and as a people really falls back down to wealth deprivation, right? We have an issue with wealth creation. Garvey saw this and he tried to address it. It still lingers today. And it is the reason why when we see the ones who are generating wealth in our community, however they're doing it, whether them as a Michael Jordan and getting millions of dollars, or they're a Michael Jackson and getting millions of dollars, or they are a Frank Lucas, or what the other one, Bumpy Johnson, selling drugs, gambling, but still generating money. That is who all eyes are on the community, because of the wealth deprivation. Because it's also the reason why, as a people, we're such a large consumer race, right? Because we consume the things that it's a way to pacify our need for wealth. We want to see, there was a joke when I used to hang out at Howard University, said, if you meet a Jamaican, right, him driving a BMW, him wearing a ballet boot, shoes crisp, everything nice, dopest car, and if you go to him house and open the door, no furniture and no food in the fridge. You understand? That's a joke, but I want you to think on it deeply. So it is the reason why the ones who seem to be generating wealth become are seen as the leaders in the community. We have that problem right now. So the UNI is still here, but the youths are not gravitating to it because that entertainment factor now is being outshined by the other entertainment factor. So you will have more people go to a Vibes Cartel concert than will come to a UNIA mass meeting. You understand? And they will pay them money, yet we might have 5,000 members, but only 100 of them paying the dues. You get what I'm saying? Because that entertainment factor is lacking. I want to end by playing this because as you asked about the entertainment thing, I thought of this speech that always stuck in my head from what Malcolm said about entertainers in the community and how they're foisted out as leaders, how they get this leadership position, right? Listen carefully.
I just told you a little while ago, these leaders that they call leaders, this included Lena Horne, this included Dick Gregory, and this included comedians, comics, trumpet players, baseball players. Show me in the white community where a comedian is a white leader. Show me in the white community where a singer is a white leader, or a dancer or a trumpet player is a white leader. These aren't leaders. These are puppets and clowns that have been set up over the white community and over the black community by the white community and have been made celebrities and usually say exactly what they know that the white man wants to hear.
You heard what he said? You heard what he said? The reason is because they're the ones who appear to be wealthy and have the wealth. We suffer from wealth deprivation. It doesn't work in the white community because the ones who have the real wealth in the white community are not their actors and singers. You understand? The Bill Gates and the so and so, these are not entertainers, but they control the wealth. Yes, what the Kate Perry or what the other one name, I forget. Those big singers may have money, but their community see them as singers and entertainers, not as leaders, because their community doesn't suffer from wealth deprivation and the way that affects your mentality. A lot of times we have leaders preaching consciousness, but they're not wealthy. And so the youths, they're not looking to follow them because even though they might be speaking truth to power, they don't seem to can provide the answer. The youth, they want money. They want lifestyle. They want certain things. And that is because of 300-400 years of wealth deprivation. And so Marcus Garvey tried to answer that by creating a system of wealth creation, but that was the same reason that the system rised up to crush him, because he was hitting the right answer. So we got a lot of work to do, people, but we can't talk anymore. Michael, go and get mad and start.
All right. Well, it's not as bad as that, but you know, I'm going to encourage us to take a refreshment break. I don't know about you, but I would love that. So about 10 minutes, and then we're out of here by 9:30.
Don't let me leave here with no food. All right, we're not wasting no food.
Yeah, they're on sale, but it's delicious. The yati them are excellent, exquisite. And I've said this before, but Benji, although he hails from Ghana, he do the best yati. He might do a lot of the Jamaican yati there, I tell you.
Somebody that was in Thailand said that.
Thanks everybody. Yes.
Really? While we were sitting here.
Let me get a picture with
All right.